When my wife Betty died, my son Dante inherited our house and $55 million. At least that is what he thought. The very moment the last funeral guest drove away, he threw my suitcase into the snow and said, "Go die somewhere else. Dad, you are useless to us now." I stood there shivering in the cold, looking at the house I built with my own hands. I did not beg. I did not cry. I just smiled, a sad, tired smile, because Dante did not know one thing. He did not know that the $55 million was locked in a trust he could not touch, and the code to the safe he was trying to crack was inside the head of the man he just kicked out. Before I tell you how I made my own son beg on his knees, let's get the pleasantries out of the way. If you have ever been underestimated by the people you sacrificed your life for, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments which city you are listening from. I want to see where my story travels. My name is Otis Freeman. I am 76 years old, and for 40 years I worked the night shift at a steel mill in Pittsburgh so my son would never have to touch a shovel or sweat through a pair of coveralls. My wife Betty was the heart of this family. She was the one who kept the secrets, and Lord knows we had a big one. 5 years ago, Betty hit the Powerball jackpot, $55 million. We never told a soul. Not the neighbors, not the church, and definitely not Dante. We wanted to see if our son could build a life on his own before we handed him the kingdom. We watched him. We waited. And what we saw broke Betty's heart. Dante married Jessica, a woman who looked at me like I was a stain on her expensive silk rug. They spent money they did not have. They leased cars they could not afford. They waited for us to die like vultures circling a tired old mule. The day of the funeral was the coldest day of the year in Pennsylvania. The ground was hard as iron. The wind cut through my black suit like a razor. I stood by the grave watching the dirt hit the casket, and I felt half of my soul get buried with her. Dante stood there checking his watch. Jessica was texting on her phone, probably complaining that the service was taking too long. We went back to the house for the repast. People came and ate my food and drank my wine and told me how sorry they were. But I saw the way Dante looked at me. He was not looking at a grieving father. He was looking at an obstacle. He was looking at a piece of furniture that needed to be thrown out to make room for something new. The moment the last car pulled out of the driveway, the air in the house changed. It went from somber to electric. I was sitting in my old leather armchair, the one Betty bought me for my retirement. I was holding her picture, just trying to breathe. Dante walked into the living room. He did not sit down. He stood over me, his hands in his pockets, his chest puffed out like a rooster. Jessica was right behind him, leaning against the doorframe with a glass of my best scotch in her hand. Dante cleared his throat. It was a sound I knew well. It was the sound he made before he asked for money, but this time he was not asking. "Dad, we need to talk," he said. His voice was cold. There was no warmth, no comfort. I looked up at him. My eyes were tired. My bones ached. "What is it, son?" "We have been thinking, Jessica and I. This house is too big for you. You are 76. You are slowing down. You are forgetting things." I tightened my grip on the photo frame. "I am not forgetting anything, Dante. I remember every shift I worked to pay for your college degree. I remember every time you called me only to ask for a loan you never paid back." Jessica stepped forward. Her heels clicked sharply on the hardwood floor. "Look, Otis, let's not make this difficult. Dante is the heir. This is his house now, and honestly, you do not fit in with our plans. We are going to remodel. We are going to sell. We have a life to live, and we cannot do that with you shuffling around here like a ghost." I looked at them, really looked at them. They were dressed in black, but they were not mourning. They were celebrating. They thought they had won the lottery, and in a way, they knew they had. "You found the receipt, didn't you?" I asked softly. Dante smiled. It was a cruel smile, a smile that showed too many teeth. "We found the photocopy in Mom's Bible, Dad. 55 million. We verified the numbers. The ticket is in the safe in the study. We know it. And since Mom is gone and you are legally incompetent according to the papers we are going to file, that money is ours." I felt a sharp pain in my chest, but it wasn't a heart attack. It was the realization that my wife was right. She always said Dante had a weak spirit. I always defended him. I said he just needed time, but time had only made him rot. "So that is it," I said, standing up slowly. My knees popped. I straightened my back. "You are kicking me out. On the day of your mother's funeral. It is for your own good," Dad, Dante said, taking a step back as if my poverty might be contagious. We packed a bag for you. It is on the porch. We called a cab. It will take you to the downtown shelter. They have beds. You will be fine. You are tough, right? You are a steel man." He mocked my life's work. He mocked the very sweat that fed him. Jessica took a sip of her drink. "And don't think about the safe, Otis. We have a locksmith coming in the morning. We will drill it if we have to. We don't need you. We just need the ticket." I looked around the living room. I looked at the fireplace where Betty and I used to sit and drink cocoa. I looked at the dining table where we celebrated Dante's graduation. I realized that this was no longer my home. A home is where love lives. Love had left this building 3 days ago in a hearse. I did not scream. I did not fight. I did not tell them that the safe was a custom-builds model from Germany that would lock down permanently if they tried to drill it. I did not tell them that the combination required a voice print and a retina scan. I did not tell them that the lottery ticket was already cashed and the money was sitting in a trust that required my signature to activate. I just nodded. "Okay," I said. Dante looked surprised. He expected a fight. He wanted a fight. He wanted to feel justified in his cruelty. "Okay," he repeated, blinking. "Good. That is, good." I walked past him. I walked past Jessica, who wrinkled her nose as I went by as if I smelled like old age and failure. I walked to the front door. I opened it and the winter wind hit me like a physical blow. It was snowing hard. The world was white and silent. My old battered suitcase was sitting on the top step. It was already covered in a thin layer of snow. They had packed it hours ago, before the funeral even started. I picked it up. It was heavy. It contained 40 years of clothes and 0 years of respect. "Wait," Dante called out. He walked to the door. He did not step outside. He did not want to get his Italian leather shoes wet. I turned around. Snowflakes caught in my gray beard. "Give me the keys, Dad." I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the ring of keys, the key to the front door, the key to the garage, the key to the mailbox. I dropped them into his open hand. The metal clinked. It sounded like a cell door closing. "You are making a mistake, son," I said. My voice was low. It did not tremble. Dante laughed. It was a short bark of a laugh. The only mistake was thinking you were going to live forever and spend my inheritance. "Go die somewhere else, Otis. You are done." He slammed the door. I heard the lock click, then the deadbolt, then the security chain. I was standing alone in the dark, a 76-year-old man with a suitcase and a heart full of holes. The taxi was not there. Of course, there was no taxi. That was just another lie to get me out the door without a scene. I pulled my coat tighter around me. It was an old wool coat Betty bought me 10 years ago. It was starting to fray at the cuffs, but it was warm. I put my hat on my head. I looked at the window. I could see them inside. Dante was pouring himself a drink. Jessica was dancing. They were high-fiving. They were celebrating their victory. They thought they had won. They thought they had the house and the fortune. I turned my back on them. I walked down the driveway, my boots crunching in the snow. I reached the sidewalk and looked up at the street lamp. The snow was falling in thick, heavy flakes. I had nowhere to go. My credit cards were in the house, probably already cut up by Jessica. My phone was in my pocket, but I knew Dante had canceled the family plan. I was a ghost, a homeless billionaire. But as I walked toward the bus stop at the end of the block, a strange feeling came over me. It wasn't fear, it wasn't despair, it was clarity. For the first time in my life, I saw my son clearly. I saw him without the filter of a father's love. I saw him for what he was, a predator. And predators do not understand mercy. They only understand power. I reached into the inner pocket of my coat. My fingers brushed against a small hard object. It wasn't money. It wasn't a weapon. It was a small black notebook. Betty's notebook. Inside were the account numbers, the contact for Mr. Sterling, our lawyer, and the fail-safe codes for the trust fund. Dante thought he kicked out a useless old man. He didn't know he just declared war on the only person who could save him. I sat on the cold metal bench at the bus stop. My breath formed clouds in the freezing air. A stray dog trotted by, looking at me with hungry eyes. "Hey there, boy," I whispered. "You look like I feel." The dog stopped. It wagged its tail tentatively. I checked my wallet. I had $40 in cash, enough for a warm meal and maybe a cheap motel room if I was lucky. But I wasn't going to a motel. Not yet. I needed to make a phone call. I found a payphone outside a closed gas station 2 blocks away. It is a miracle these things still exist. I dropped a quarter in. My fingers were stiff with cold as I dialed. It rang 3 times. "Sterling here," a deep voice answered. It was late, but Mr. Sterling never slept. He was the kind of lawyer who billed you for thinking about your case while he brushed his teeth. "Mr. Sterling, it is Otis," I said. "Otis, why are you calling me at this hour? Is everything all right?" "They did it," I said, just like Betty said they would. "They kicked me out." There was a silence on the line, then the sound of a pen scratching on paper. "Did they hurt you, Otis?" "Just my pride," I said, looking at the snow swirling around the phone booth. "They think the money is in the safe. They are going to try to open it." "Let them try," Sterling said, his voice hard as granite. "They will trigger the lockdown protocol. Otis, where are you? I will send a car." "No," I said. "I need them to believe I am gone. I need them to believe I am broken. If you pick me up in a limousine, they will know. So what is the plan, Otis?" "The plan is to let them hang themselves, Mr. Sterling. Give them enough rope. Let them think they are kings. And when the clock runs out, I want to be the one who pulls the chair." I could hear Sterling smile through the phone. "Very well, Otis. The 30-day clause is in effect. If they do not provide care for you for 30 days after Betty's death, they forfeit everything." The clock started tonight. 30 days, I whispered. "I just have to survive 30 days. I hung up the phone. I wrapped my scarf tighter. The cold was biting deeper now, seeping into my bones. I walked back to the bus stop. The stray dog was still there waiting for me. "Come on," I said to the dog. "Let's go find a warm grate. We have a long month ahead of us." As I walked into the darkness, leaving the warmth of my former life behind, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a judge who had just begun a very long trial, and the verdict was going to be expensive. But what I didn't know then as I trudged through the snow was that Dante wasn't just greedy. He was desperate, and desperation makes people dangerous. I thought I was playing a game of chess. I didn't realize I was stepping into a cage with a wounded animal. The next morning would bring the first real test, and it wouldn't be the cold. It would be the realization of just how far my son had fallen. The wind in Pittsburgh has a way of finding the gaps in your clothes that you did not even know existed, especially when you are 76 years old and walking down a street you used to drive down in a warm truck. My knees were grinding together like 2 rusty gears with every step I took away from the house that was supposed to be my sanctuary. The snow was not just falling anymore, it was driving sideways, stinging my face like 1,000 little needles. That stray dog was still trailing me about 10 paces back. He was a scruffy thing, ribs showing through matted fur, one ear torn from some fight he probably lost. I stopped under the flickering light of a street lamp and turned to him. "Go home, boy," I rasped, my voice sounding like gravel in a blender. "You are following the wrong man. I have got nothing for you." The dog just sat down in the snow and watched me. He knew a lie when he heard one. We were both out here because someone decided we were not worth keeping. I needed shelter. My pride had kept me warm for the first few blocks, but pride does not stop hypothermia. I checked my wallet again. $40. It was not much, but it should have been enough for a night at the Starlight Motel down on 5th Avenue. It was a place for truckers and people who did not want to be found, but it had heat, and that was all I cared about. The walk took me an hour. By the time I pushed open the glass door of the motel lobby, my feet were blocks of ice. The heat hit me, and for a second I felt dizzy. The clerk was a young man with headphones around his neck and a look that said he had seen everything and cared about none of it. "Room for one," I said, leaning against the counter to take the weight off my bad hip. $60, the clerk said without looking up from his phone. I frowned. The sign outside says 39. That sign is from 1999 Pops. $60. Cash or card? I swallowed hard. I only had 40 in cash. I hesitated. I knew I should save the cash for food, but I was freezing. I reached into my wallet and pulled out the joint credit card Betty and I had shared for 20 years. It was the emergency card, the one we kept for car repairs or medical bills. It had a $10,000 limit and we always paid it off every month. I slid the card across the counter. The clerk sighed, picked it up and swiped it. He waited. He swiped it again. Then he looked at the screen and frowned. Declined. "Try it again," I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. There is money on there. I have excellent credit. It says card reported lost or stolen, the clerk said, sliding it back to me. Account frozen by primary holder. Primary holder. That used to be Betty. When she passed, the authority must have transferred to the executor of the estate. Dante. My son had not just kicked me out. He had called the bank. He had reported the cards stolen. He wanted to make sure I had absolutely nothing. He did not just want me gone, he wanted me erased. He wanted me to suffer. Please, I said, and I hated the shake in my voice. It is a mistake. My son, he is confused. I have $40 cash. Can you let me stay for 40? Just for tonight. I am an old man's son. It is below freezing out there. The clerk looked at me. He looked at my frayed coat. He looked at the snow melting off my hat onto his clean floor. No charity here, Pops. Management counts the till every morning. If you do not have the 60, you have got to go. He pointed to the door. I took my card. It was just a piece of useless plastic now. I walked back out into the cold. The door chimed behind me, a cheerful little sound that felt like a mockery. The dog was waiting for me by the ice machine. I guess it is just you and me, I muttered. I walked another 3 blocks to the central bus station. It was not a hotel, but it was covered. There were benches. There were other people who looked like they had been discarded by the world. I found a spot on a metal bench away from the wind. I sat down, and the cold metal seeped right through my trousers. I pulled my coat tight. The dog curled up at my feet, his body heat a small mercy against my ankles. I closed my eyes and tried to ignore the smell of diesel fumes and unwashed bodies. I tried to ignore the hunger cramping my stomach. To keep my mind off the cold, I let myself remember. I went back to that day 5 years ago. It was a Tuesday. Betty had come home from the grocery store shaking. She was not sick. She was terrified. She locked the door behind her and pulled the blinds. Otis, she had whispered, putting the ticket on the kitchen table. Look. I looked. I checked the numbers. Then I checked them again. $55 million. We sat there in silence for an hour. Most people would have screamed. Most people would have called everyone they knew. But Betty and I, we were different. We had seen what money did to people in our neighborhood. We had seen families torn apart over a few $1,000s of insurance money, and we knew Dante. Even back then, 5 years ago, Dante was showing signs of the man he would become. He was 30 years old and still asking us to pay his car note. He was buying designer suits while we were clipping coupons. He treated waitresses like dirt. He rolled his eyes when we prayed before dinner. If we give him this money, Betty had said, tears in her eyes, it will kill him, Otis. He will sniff it up his nose or drink it down his throat, or some woman will take him for everything he has. He is not ready. He does not have the character for this kind of burden. So we made a plan. We hired Mr. Sterling, the best lawyer in the state. We set up a blind trust. We claimed the money anonymously through a legal entity. To the world, we were just Otis and Betty, the retired steelworker, and the school librarian. But we wrote a will, a very specific will. Betty insisted on the clause. She called it the character clause. She said, Otis, if I go first, Dante is going to show you who he really is. If he takes care of you, if he honors you, he gets the kingdom. But if he throws you away like an old rapper, he gets nothing. I argued with her. I told her our son was good at heart. I told her he just needed guidance. She just held my hand and said, prepare for the storm, Otis. I hope I am wrong. But prepare for the storm. Sitting there on that freezing bench with the noise of the city around me, I realized my wife was smarter than me. She saw the rot in our son long before I did. I reached into my pocket and touched the notebook again. The account numbers, the passwords. I was sitting on a bus bench, shivering with a stray dog at my feet, and I was worth $55 million. The irony was bitter enough to choke on. Dante was probably sleeping in my bed right now, dreaming of the sports cars he was going to buy. He thought he had won. He thought he was the king. But he did not know the rules of the game. The trust fund had a trigger. Mr. Sterling had explained it to me a dozen times. Upon the death of Betty Freeman, a 30-day clock begins. The primary beneficiary, Dante Freeman, must demonstrate continuous and compassionate care for the surviving spouse, Otis Freeman. Any evidence of abandonment, abuse, or neglect during this period will result in the immediate and irrevocable transfer of all assets to the secondary beneficiary. The secondary beneficiary was not a person. It was a charity, the Betty Freeman Foundation for the Homeless. If I walked into that house right now and told Dante the truth, he would probably pretend to love me. He would fake it for the money. But that wasn't the test. The test was character, and he had already failed. But I needed him to fail completely. I needed him to feel the weight of his actions. I needed to know if there was any redemption left in his soul, or if the money had eaten it all away. So I decided then and there on that cold bench that I would stay dead to him. I would let him think I was gone. I would let him think he had won. I shifted on the bench, trying to find a comfortable position. My old joints screamed in protest. The dog lifted his head and licked my hand. I opened my eyes. A police officer was walking his beat, tapping his nightstick against his leg. He looked at me, then looked away. To him, I was just another old bum, another statistic. I wondered what Dante would do tomorrow, when the locksmith couldn't open the safe, when the bank told him the accounts were frozen, when the reality of his greed started to close in on him. He would come looking for me. Not because he missed me, but because he needed me. He needed my signature. He needed my authority. He would hunt me down. And when he found me, I had to be ready. I closed my eyes again and let the exhaustion take me. I dreamed of Betty. She was standing in the kitchen making biscuits. She looked at me and smiled. "Stand tall, Otis," she said. "The fire refines the gold." When I woke up, the sun was rising gray and bleak over the city skyline. My body was stiff, so stiff I could barely move. The dog was gone. I sat up and rubbed my face. My beard was rough with frost. I was hungry. My stomach was twisting into knots. I stood up and the world spun. I had to grab the back of the bench to steady myself. I needed food, and I needed a plan. I couldn't stay here. Dante knew I didn't have a car. He knew I didn't have money. He would check the shelters first, then the bus stations. I had to go somewhere he would never look, somewhere he would never be caught dead. I had to go to the bottom. I gathered my coat around me and started walking. I headed toward the river, toward the underside of the bridges where the invisible people lived. As I walked, I saw a reflection in a shop window. An old man bent against the wind, looking like he had lost everything. I stopped and straightened my back. I fixed my hat. "I am Otis Freeman," I whispered to the glass, "and I am not done yet." But I did not know that the next few hours would bring a humiliation worse than the cold. I did not know that Dante wasn't just waiting for the locksmith. He was already making moves. And I was about to find out just how far my son would go to get what he thought was his. I turned the corner and saw a familiar car slowly cruising down the street. It was Dante's black SUV. He was looking for me. I ducked into an alley, my heart racing. The hunt had begun. While I was shivering in that alleyway, trying to make myself invisible to the black SUV cruising past my own home was filled with the heat of greed and the screeching sound of a drill. I learned later from the neighbors and from the security footage I eventually recovered exactly what happened in my study while I was fighting for warmth. Dante and Jessica had not waited until morning. They had called a 24-hour locksmith, a man named Miller, who charged triple for after-hours calls. They did not care about the cost. In their minds, they were already billionaires. They were spending money they did not have on a future they did not deserve. Miller was drilling into the side of my German safe, the one Betty had insisted we buy to protect our secret. It was a beast of a machine hidden behind a painting of the steel mill where I had spent half my life. Dante was pacing the room, sweating through his funeral suit. Jessica was sitting in my leather chair, swirling a glass of wine, staring at the safe door with eyes that looked like they belonged to a starving shark. "Can't you go any faster?" Dante snapped, his voice cracking. "We are paying you $500 an hour." Miller didn't even look up. He just kept applying pressure to the diamond tip drill. "Unless you know the combination or possess the biometrics, this is the only way, buddy. And this steel is hardened. It takes time." Time was the one thing they thought they had. They thought I was gone. They thought I was a confused old man wandering the streets who would probably freeze to death before sunrise. They didn't know the clock was ticking against them, not me. Finally, there was a loud metallic pop, the sound of a lock surrendering. "Got it," Miller said, stepping back and wiping grease from his hands. Dante shoved him aside. He didn't even say thank you. He grabbed the heavy steel handle and wrenched it open. The safe was mostly empty. We kept our life simple. There were no stacks of gold bars, no piles of cash, just a few legal documents, the deed to the house, and a single white envelope sitting on the middle shelf. That is it, Jessica screamed, jumping up from the chair and spilling wine on my carpet. That is the ticket. Dante grabbed the envelope. His hands were shaking so hard he almost dropped it. He ripped it open. Inside was a slip of paper, the Powerball ticket, the numbers that matched the ones Betty had circled in her Bible, the numbers that were worth $55 million. We did it, Dante whispered, tears of joy streaming down his face. We are rich, Jess. We are finally rich. No more debt. No more pretending. We own the world. Jessica snatched the ticket from his hand. Let me see it. Let me see our freedom. She held it up to the light. She scanned the numbers. Her smile was so wide it looked painful, but then her expression froze. Her thumb rubbed against the paper. She rubbed it again, harder. The paper felt wrong. It was too smooth. It was standard printer paper. Dante, she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Why does this feel like copy paper? What? Dante asked, looking confused. She turned the ticket over. There was no watermark. There was no perforation. And then she saw it. In the bottom corner in faint gray ink were the words, "Copy, do not cash." It is a photocopy, Jessica shrieked. Her voice went from joy to pure, unadulterated rage in a heartbeat. It is a fake. Dante grabbed it back. No. No, that is impossible. Mom kept it in here. Why would she keep a copy in the safe? Because they didn't trust us, you idiot, Jessica yelled. She threw her wine glass against the wall. It shattered, sending shards of glass and red liquid raining down onto my desk. She started tearing through the rest of the safe. She pulled out the deed. She pulled out our marriage license. She threw them on the floor and stomped on them with her heels. Where is it? Jessica screamed. Where is the real ticket? Dante was pale. He looked like he was going to vomit. Maybe they cashed it already. Maybe the money is in the bank. Check the accounts, Jessica ordered him. Now. Dante scrambled for his laptop. He tried to log into the joint account I had shared with Betty, the one I had foolishly let him have access to for emergencies. He typed in the password. Access denied, account frozen. He tried again. Contact account holder. Otis Freeman. He tried the investment portfolio. Access restricted. Biometric authorization required. Dante slammed the laptop shut. Dad locked us out. He changed the codes. Or the bank froze it when Mom died. Jessica was pacing the room like a caged tiger. She swept my collection of antique model cars off the shelf. They crashed onto the hardwood floor, twisting into metal scrap. She grabbed the lamp from the desk and smashed it against the window. She was destroying my sanctuary, my memories, not because she was grieving, but because she was thwarted. That old man, she hissed. That useless, senile old man. He tricked us. He doesn't have the brains for this. Dante stammered, defending his own underestimation of me. He is just a factory worker, Jess. He doesn't know how to set up trusts and biometric locks. Betty did, Jessica said. Your mother was the smart one. She knew. She knew we were waiting, and she set a trap. She walked over to Dante and grabbed him by the lapels of his suit, shaking him. We need him, Dante. We need the old man. Dante looked at her confused. But we just kicked him out. I told him to go die. Well, you better hope he isn't dead yet, Jessica snarled. Because without his signature, without his fingerprint or his retina or whatever he set up, we don't get a dime. We have $200,000 in debt, Dante. Vinny is going to break your legs if we don't pay him next week. We need that $55 million. The reality of their situation began to sink in. They weren't rich. They were broke. They were worse than broke. They were in a hole so deep they couldn't see the sky. And the only ladder out was the 76-year-old man they had just thrown into a blizzard. Dante pulled out his phone. I will call him. He dialed my number. I was in the alleyway watching the snow pile up on the dumpsters when my phone vibrated in my pocket. I saw his name on the screen. I didn't answer. I turned the phone off. Back in the study, Dante listened to the voicemail click on. He threw his phone onto the couch. He turned it off. He isn't answering. Find him, Jessica commanded. Where am I supposed to look? Dante asked, his voice rising in panic. It is 10 degrees outside. He could be anywhere. He could be frozen on a park bench. Then you better start digging through the snow, Jessica said, her eyes cold and hard. Because if he dies, that money goes to the state or to some charity. I read about these trusts, Dante. If the primary beneficiary cannot claim, it usually goes to a secondary cause. We get nothing. We have to bring him back. Dante said, rubbing his temples. We have to apologize. We have to bring him home. No, Jessica corrected him. We don't have to apologize. We just have to get him here. We have to get power of attorney. We have to get him to sign the release. Once we have the money, we can dump him in a nursing home like we planned. But right now, he is not a father. He is a walking ATM card, and we lost the PIN code. She grabbed her coat. Get in the car, Dante. We are going hunting. Hunting. That was the word she used. Not searching, not rescuing. Hunting. They left the house in chaos. My study was destroyed. My wife's memory was desecrated. They ran out into the snow, not out of love, but out of a desperate, greedy panic. I watched from the shadows of the alley as Dante's SUV sped past again. He was driving too fast, sliding on the ice. He was looking at every bus stop, every doorway. I pulled my hat lower. I knew what was happening. They had opened the safe. They had found the copy. And now they realized their mistake. They thought I was helpless. They thought I was prey. But as I watched their taillights disappear around the corner, I felt a strange new strength rising in my chest. They were looking for Otis, the retired steelworker. They were looking for Dad, the pushover. But that man was gone. He died the moment they took his keys. The man hiding in the shadows was someone else. I was the architect of their judgment. I waited until the coast was clear, then I slipped out of the alley and headed toward the subway station. I needed to get underground. I needed to disappear because I knew my son. He wouldn't stop. He was scared, and a scared man is persistent. But I had a meeting to prepare for. Mr. Sterling was waiting. And tomorrow I would start pulling the strings that would make my children dance. I touched the notebook in my pocket one more time. You want to find me, Dante? I whispered to the cold wind. You will. But you are not going to like what you find. I descended the stairs into the subway station, leaving the storm above ground. But the real storm was just beginning, and it was going to tear the roof right off Dante's life. The Rust Bucket Diner on 4th Street was the kind of place that smelled of stale grease and old coffee long before you even opened the door. It was a place for factory workers getting off the night shift and for people who had nowhere else to go. It was the last place anyone would look for a millionaire lawyer like Archibald Sterling. I walked in a few minutes past 6 in the morning. My bones felt like they were made of glass. The cold from the night before had settled deep into my joints, and every step was a reminder of my age. I pulled my hat down low and scanned the booths in the back. There he was. Mr. Sterling looked like a diamond in a coal chute. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than this entire building, sitting in a torn red vinyl booth with an untouched cup of coffee in front of him. He was checking his watch. When he saw me, his face fell. He stood up immediately, ignoring the waitress who was trying to refill his cup. Otis, he said, his voice thick with concern. Good Lord, look at you. I sat down across from him. I didn't have the energy for pleasantries. Sit down, Mr. Sterling. You are drawing attention. He sat, but he leaned forward, his eyes scanning my face. My beard was unkempt. My eyes were red from the wind and the lack of sleep. I looked exactly like what I was. A homeless old man who had been thrown away. Did you eat? He asked. Not since yesterday morning, I said. He signaled the waitress. 2 number 1s, extra bacon, and fresh coffee. Now. The authority in his voice made the waitress jump. We sat in silence until the coffee came. I wrapped my hands around the hot mug, letting the heat seep into my frozen palms. So I said after the first sip, Did they try it? Sterling nodded. He opened his leather briefcase and pulled out a tablet. At 3:14 this morning, we received a security alert from the biometric lock on your safe. Unauthorized access attempt. Then at 3:20, we logged an attempt to access the joint checking account via online banking. 5 minutes later, an attempt on the investment portfolio. I let out a low, humorless chuckle. They wasted no time. My wife was barely cold in the ground. They are locked out, Otis, completely, Sterling said. The protocols Betty set up are ironclad. Without your retinal scan or your voice authorization, they cannot touch a penny. The 55 million is sitting in the dark and they can't find the light switch. He paused and looked at me seriously. But that isn't why I asked you to meet me here, Otis. We need to talk about the will, specifically Clause 7. I frowned. I remembered the will, of course. Betty and I had agonized over it, but my memory was foggy with grief and exhaustion. Clause 7. Remind me. Sterling pulled a thick document from his briefcase. He turned to a page marked with a red tab. Betty insisted on this, he said softly. She called it the fail-safe. Listen to me closely, Otis, because this changes everything. He began to read. The legal jargon washed over me, but the meaning pierced through the fog like a lighthouse beam. In the event of my death, the entirety of the estate, including the lottery winnings and the primary residence, shall be held in a probationary trust for a period of 30 days. During this period, the primary beneficiary, Dante Freeman, must demonstrate active, compassionate, and continuous care for the surviving spouse, Otis Freeman. Sterling looked up over his reading glasses. It continues, Otis. If at any point during these 30 days the surviving spouse is removed from the marital home, denied access to funds, or subjected to neglect, the trust dissolves. The primary beneficiary is disinherited completely, and the assets transfer immediately to the secondary beneficiary. I sat back in the booth stunned. Betty, my brilliant, beautiful Betty, she had seen this coming. She had looked into the future and seen Dante standing at the door with my suitcase. So they have already lost, I whispered. They kicked me out on day one. They failed the test before they even knew they were taking it. Sterling nodded. Technically, yes. I can file the motion this morning. We can have the police at the house by noon. We can evict them. We can reveal the trust fund and transfer everything to the charity. You can have your house back by dinner time, Otis. Just say the word. I looked down at my plate of eggs and bacon that had just arrived. I was starving, but my appetite was gone. I thought about it. I thought about going back home with the police. I thought about seeing the look on Dante's face when he realized he had lost $55 million because he couldn't be decent for 24 hours. It would be justice. It would be swift, but it wouldn't be enough. If I go back now, I said slowly, Dante will never learn. He will just be angry. He will blame me. He will say I tricked him. He will spend the rest of his life hating me and thinking he was robbed. Sterling tilted his head. He robbed himself, Otis. I know that. You know that. But he doesn't know that. Not yet. I took a bite of bacon. The salt tasted good on my tongue. Mr. Sterling, I don't want you to file that motion. Not yet. Sterling looked confused. Otis, you are sleeping on the street. You are 76. This is dangerous. I survived 40 years in a steel mill, Mr. Sterling. I survived the riots in '68. I can survive my son. What are you planning, Otis? I leaned across the table, lowering my voice. If you tell them about the clause now, they will just pretend. They will come find me, drag me back to the house, and put on a show for 30 days. They will feed me soup and fluff my pillows and count the seconds until the clock runs out. And then the moment the money hits their account, they will dump me in a nursing home just like they planned. I looked Sterling in the eye. I don't want their acting, Mr. Sterling. I want their repentance, or I want their ruin. Sterling closed the folder. He was a lawyer, but he was a father too. I saw the understanding dawn in his eyes. You want to let them suffer, he said. I want them to feel what I am feeling, I said. I want them to feel helpless. I want them to feel broke. I want them to realize that without me, they are nothing. So here is what we are going to do. I pointed a finger at him, my hand steady for the first time in days. Freeze everything, not just the trust. Freeze the accounts they think are theirs, the joint accounts I co-signed on, the credit cards. Call the bank and tell them there has been suspicious activity. Lock it all down. Sterling smiled a small, sharp smile. That I can do. I can flag every asset connected to your social security number for review. It will take weeks to untangle. Good, I said. And don't tell them about the clause. Don't tell them about the 30 days. Let them think the money is just out of reach. Let them think they just need my signature. They will hunt you, Otis, Sterling warned. They will be desperate. Desperate people do violent things. Let them come, I said. I won't be easy to find. I know this city better than they do. I know the cracks in the sidewalk they step over. Sterling reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. Otis, I cannot legally let my client starve in the street. This is $5,000 in cash. It is from the petty cash fund. Untraceable. Take it. I looked at the envelope. It was a lifeline. It meant a hotel. It meant food. I took it, but I didn't put it in my pocket. I slid out $200 and pushed the rest back. If I have too much money, I will get comfortable, I said, and I need to stay angry. $200 is enough for food and essentials. Keep the rest for when this is over. Sterling hesitated, then took the envelope back. You are a stubborn man, Otis Freeman. Betty used to say the same thing, I said, standing up. I put my hat back on. One more thing, Mr. Sterling. If Dante calls you, and he will call you, tell him you haven't seen me. Tell him the will is complicated. Tell him the assets are under audit. Tell him whatever you have to tell him to make him sweat. I will stall him, Sterling promised. But Otis, if you need help, if you get sick, call me. I will come get you myself. I will be fine, I said. I walked toward the door of the diner. Otis Sterling called out. I turned. He gets nothing right, even if he finds you, unless he changes. I looked out the window at the gray snow covering the city. He gets what he earns, Mr. Sterling. Just like I taught him. If he earns forgiveness, he gets it. If he earns nothing, he gets nothing. I pushed open the door and walked back out into the cold. I felt stronger now. I had a secret weapon. I had Clause 7. Dante thought he was holding all the cards. He thought he had the house and the power. But he was standing on a trapdoor, and I was the one holding the lever. He had 29 days left. 29 days to show me he was a human being. But I knew my son. He wouldn't use those days to reflect. He would use them to attack. He was going to come after me with everything he had. And when he did, I would be waiting. I headed toward the downtown library. It was warm there, and they had computers. I needed to see what my son was doing. I needed to see the digital trail of his panic. The game was on, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was winning. While I sat in the warmth of the public library watching the snow fall against the window. My son was busy digging his own grave with a diamond-studded shovel. I had logged into the shared cloud account Dante had set up for me years ago. He thought he was being helpful back then, backing up my photos, but he forgot that access goes both ways. I could see everything he was doing. Every photo Jessica took, every receipt she snapped a picture of to brag to her friends. It was terrifying to watch. Sterling had done his job perfectly. The bank accounts were frozen, the credit cards were declined. Dante and Jessica were sitting in a mansion worth millions, but they could not buy a gallon of milk with their own plastic. Most people in that situation would panic. Most people would stop spending. But my son and his wife were not most people. They were addicts, and their drug was status. They were convinced that the $55 million was just a signature away. They believed the frozen accounts were just a temporary annoyance, a bureaucratic hiccup caused by my wife's death. They had the photocopy of the ticket. To them, that was as good as cash in the bank. So instead of tightening their belts, they decided to bet the farm. I watched the digital trail of their destruction unfold in real time. It started with a trip to the south side of the city. I knew the neighborhood well. It was where the steel mills used to be before they rusted out. Now it was the territory of men like Vinny the Shark Moretti. Vinny didn't run a bank. He ran a pawn shop that was a front for high-interest misery. I saw the GPS data from Dante's phone ping at Vinny's address. I knew exactly what was happening. Dante walked into that back room wearing his best suit, trying to look like a millionaire who just forgot his wallet. Jessica was with him, probably wearing her funeral pearls. They sat across from Vinny, a man who had cut off fingers for less than $1,000. I can only imagine the conversation, but knowing Dante, it went something like this. He probably threw the photocopy of the lottery ticket on the desk. He probably showed Vinny the deed to my house, which he thought was his house. He probably said, "Vinny, my friend, we are coming into $55 million next week. We just need a bridge loan. Something to tide us over until the lawyers clear the paperwork." Vinny would have looked at the ticket. He would have looked at the greed in Dante's eyes. He didn't care about lottery tickets. He cared about leverage. "I need $200,000, Dante would have said. Cash. Today." And Vinny, being a businessman, would have smiled. $200,000. Sure, kid. But since you are a high risk, you pay me back $400,000 in 7 days. 1 week. Or I take the house. And maybe a kneecap. Dante signed. I know he signed because an hour later, Jessica posted a photo on her private Instagram story. It was a picture of a thick stack of $100 bills banded in rubber inside her designer purse. The caption read, "Pre-inheritance shopping spree. Haters will say it's fake." They walked out of that pawn shop with a bag full of blood money and a death sentence hanging over their heads. They had 7 days to pay back nearly $500,000. They were betting my life on it. From the library computer, I tracked their movement. They didn't go to the grocery store. They didn't pay the electric bill. They went straight to the exotic car dealership on Auto Row. I closed my eyes and rubbed my temples. I remembered when I bought Dante his first car. It was a used Ford Focus. I worked double shifts for 6 months to pay for it. He complained that it wasn't a sports car. He was 16 then. He was 35 now, and he hadn't changed a bit. I left the library and took the bus down to the dealership. I had to see it with my own eyes. I stood across the street, huddled in a doorway, watching through the glass walls of the showroom. There they were. Dante was laughing loud and manic. He was pointing at a bright neon green Lamborghini Urus. It was a monster of a car, loud and aggressive, just like him. The salesman was practically drooling. He could smell the desperation and the cash. I watched Dante dump the bag of cash on the salesman's desk. It was vulgar. It was the kind of thing you see in bad movies. He was buying a $300,000 car with loan shark money while his father was sleeping on a bus bench. Jessica climbed into the passenger seat, taking selfies in the rearview mirror. She looked triumphant. She looked like she had finally won the game she had been playing since the day she met my son. They drove off the lot, the engine roaring like a beast. They didn't even notice the old man in the frayed coat watching them from across the street. They sped past me, spraying slush onto the sidewalk. I checked my phone. Another alert from the shared calendar. Inheritance Gala, Saturday night, catering by Lux. They were planning a party, a massive, extravagant party to announce their wealth to the world. They invited everyone, Dante, old college friends who had become successful, Jessica's high society wannabe friends, the neighbors who used to look down on them. I called Mr. Sterling from a payphone. They borrowed money, I said. A lot of it. From Vinnie Moretti. Sterling swore softly on the other end of the line. That is dangerous, Otis. Vinnie doesn't sue people, he hurts them. They bought a Lamborghini, I continued. And they are throwing a party Saturday night. They are digging a hole to China, Sterling said. Otis, we should intervene. If Vinnie finds out the house isn't theirs... Not yet, I said, cutting him off. Let them have their party. Let them show the world who they are. But the danger... Dante thinks he is a man. I said, my voice hard. A man pays his debts. A man faces his consequences. Let him play the big shot for a few days. I hung up. I walked back toward the shelter, but I didn't go in. I couldn't be around people tonight. I felt dirty just watching them. I felt ashamed. Not for me, but for the blood that ran in Dante's veins. My blood. How had it turned so sour? I found a 24-hour laundromat. It was warm inside, and the owner let me sit in the back if I promised to clean the lint traps. I sat there listening to the rhythmic thumping of the washing machines. I thought about the money in Dante's pocket. It wasn't real wealth. It was a mirage. It was a loan against a future that didn't exist. They were spending millions in their heads, but in reality they were spending their safety. They were spending their freedom. I pulled out Betty's notebook. I looked at her handwriting. She had written a note in the margin of the trust fund page. Money reveals the heart. She was right. The money, even the promise of the money, had peeled back Dante's skin and revealed the rot underneath. He wasn't just greedy. He was reckless. He was willing to endanger his wife, himself, and his father for a moment of glory. I checked the social media feed one last time before trying to sleep. Jessica had posted a video. They were in the new Lamborghini, driving fast down the highway. Champagne bottles were popping in the background. To the new kings of the city, Dante shouted over the music. We run this town now. The old guard is dead. Long live the new money. I turned off the screen. The darkness of the laundromat felt heavy. Enjoy the ride, son, I whispered into the hum of the dryers. Enjoy it while it lasts, because the repo man is coming. And he doesn't want the car. He wants your soul. I knew that in a few days that money would run out, the party would end, and Vinnie Moretti would come knocking on the door of the house Dante claimed was his. And when that happened, Dante would realize that a Lamborghini cannot outrun the consequences of betraying your father. He would need help. He would need a savior. And the only man who could save him was the one he left in the snow. But I wasn't ready to save him, not yet. The lesson had only just begun. The heat was turned up, but he needed to feel the fire. I closed my eyes and waited for morning. Tomorrow the hunt would continue. Dante would be looking for me again, but this time not to kick me out. He needed me to sign the release forms for the trust so he could pay Vinnie back. He was going to come at me with everything he had. Threats, lawyers, maybe even force. Let him come. I was made of steel. He was made of paper, and paper burns. The steam in the back of Big Earl's kitchen was thick enough to chew on. It smelled of fried chicken grease, bleach, and old onions. My hands were submerged in scalding water, the skin on my fingers pruning and cracking from the harsh industrial soap. I had been standing at this metal sink for 8 hours straight, scrubbing the remnants of other people's meals off ceramic plates. My back throbbed with a dull ache that reminded me of my years at the steel mill, but there was an honesty to this pain that I had missed. Big Earl, a man the size of a vending machine, had given me a chance when no one else would. He didn't ask for ID. He didn't ask why a 76-year-old man was looking for work in the middle of winter. He just handed me an apron and said if I could keep up, I could eat. So I kept up. I scrubbed until my shoulders burned. I focused on the rhythm of the work: wash, rinse, rack, repeat. It was a meditation. It kept my mind off the cold nights sleeping in the subway station. It kept my mind off the fact that my son was probably driving a Lamborghini while I was scraping grits off a pan. But peace is a fragile thing, especially when you are being hunted. It was just after the lunch rush when the bell above the front door jingled aggressively. The chatter in the dining room died down almost instantly. I didn't look up at first. I just kept scrubbing. But then I felt it. A change in the air pressure. A familiar coldness that had nothing to do with the winter wind. I heard the click of expensive heels on the linoleum floor, followed by the heavy, confident steps of a man who thinks he owns the sidewalk. "There he is," a voice sneered. It was a voice I had taught to speak. A voice I had read bedtime stories to. Look at him. It is pathetic. I turned off the faucet. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. Big Earl stepped out from the prep line, a cleaver in his hand, his face tight with protective anger. "Can I help you folks?" Earl asked, his voice deep and rumbling. I turned around slowly, wiping my wet hands on my stained apron. Dante stood in the doorway of the kitchen, looking like a glossy magazine cutout pasted onto a gritty black and white photo. He was wearing a navy blue Italian suit that probably cost more than Big Earl made in a month. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. Beside him, Jessica was holding a handkerchief over her nose as if the smell of honest work was toxic fumes. They looked out of place. They looked ridiculous. But mostly they looked dangerous. "Hello, Dante," I said quietly. Dante laughed. It was a sharp barking sound that made the customers in the front crane their necks. "Hello," he mimicked. "That is all you have to say. I have been looking for you for 3 days, Dad. I have been to every shelter and flop house in the city. And here you are, washing dishes." He stepped into the kitchen, ignoring Earl's warning glare. He looked around at the grease traps and the stacks of dirty plates with open disgust. "Is this what you want? Is this how you want to end your life? Scrubbing other people's filth? You are embarrassing me, Dad. You are embarrassing the family name." "The family name," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You mean the name you are trying to sign on checks that do not belong to you?" Dante's face flushed a deep crimson. He stepped closer, invading my personal space. The smell of his expensive cologne clashed violently with the smell of the kitchen. "Don't play games with me, old man. We know about the trust. We know about the biometric lock. We know we need you." Jessica chimed in, her voice shrill and cutting. "Just give it up, Otis. You are making a scene. Look at you. You look like a beggar. It is disgusting. Just sign the papers so we can get you into a home where you belong." Dante reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick document. It was folded to a signature page. He pulled a gold pen from his pocket. "Power of attorney," he said, holding it out to me. "Full, durable power of attorney. You sign this and I take control of the estate. I unlock the funds. I pay off the debts. And I put you in the best facility money can buy. You will have a warm bed, Dad. You will have nurses to wipe your chin. You won't have to scrub plates like a slave." I looked at the paper, then I looked at my son. He wasn't here to bring me home. He wasn't here to apologize for throwing me into the snow. He was here because he was cornered. He was here because Vinny the shark was probably breathing down his neck and he needed a way out. "I am not signing anything, Dante," I said. "And I am not a slave. I am earning my keep. There is dignity in this, something you wouldn't understand," Dante snapped. The veneer of the concerned son cracked, and the desperate debtor underneath exploded. "Dignity," he shouted, spitting a little as he spoke. "You call this dignity? You are a joke. You are a stubborn, senile old fool who is holding on to money he didn't even earn. Mom won that money, not you. And now you are holding it hostage while I am trying to build a legacy." He grabbed my arm. His grip was hard, painful. He dug his fingers into my bicep, trying to physically force the pen into my hand. "Sign the paper," he hissed. Sign it now, or I swear to God I will have you declared mentally incompetent by morning. I have a lawyer who can do it. I have a doctor who will testify you are losing your mind. Look at you. You are washing dishes in a ghetto diner. That is proof enough." Big Earl stepped forward, the cleaver lowering menacingly. "Let him go, son. I won't ask twice." Dante didn't let go. He shook me. "Stop being selfish, Dad. Sign it." The customers were standing up now. Phones were out recording. My shame was being broadcast to the world. My son abusing me in public, treating me like a recalcitrant child. Jessica laughed, a cruel, high-pitched sound. "He probably can't even write his name anymore, Dante. Look at his hands. They are shaking. He is useless. Useless." That word again. The anger inside me didn't flare up like a firecracker. It rose like molten steel in a blast furnace. Slow, heavy, unstoppable. I looked at my hands. They were shaking, yes. But not from age. From rage. I looked at the sink next to me. It was filled with 10 gallons of gray, lukewarm water floating with bits of cornbread, chicken skin, and grease. It was the filth of the day. The residue of consumption. Dante was still yelling, still shaking my arms, still demanding I give him the world on a silver platter. I made a choice. I yanked my arm free with a strength that surprised him. 40 years of swinging a hammer doesn't leave you just because you retire. Dante stumbled back, looking shocked. "What are you doing?" "I am cleaning up," I said. I reached into the sink. I grabbed the heavy plastic wash basin with both hands. It was heavy, filled to the brim with the nastiest slurry you can imagine. "Hey, Dante," said, his eyes going wide as he realized what was happening. "Hey, no." I didn't hesitate. I didn't blink. I heaved the basin forward. The wave of dirty dishwater hit him squarely in the chest. It was a tidal wave of kitchen filth. It soaked his Italian suit instantly. It splashed up into his open mouth. It drenched his perfectly styled hair. A piece of wet lettuce landed on his shoulder. Grease stains bloomed across his silk tie. Jessica screamed, jumping back, but she wasn't fast enough. The splash hit her designer dress, soaking the hem in gray sludge. Dante stood there, arms out, dripping, frozen in shock. He sputtered, spitting out dishwater, wiping grease from his eyes. He looked like a drowned rat. The arrogance washed away, leaving only a wet, shivering boy. The diner went silent. Then someone in the back started laughing. Then another. Soon the whole place was roaring. Dante looked at me, his face purple with humiliation. "You crazy old bastard," he screamed. "You ruined my suit. This costs $3,000. I put the basin down on the counter with a loud thud. I wiped my hands on my apron. I stood tall, my back straight, my eyes locking onto his. I looked him up and down, taking in the pathetic sight of his vanity dripping onto the floor. "You are worried about the suit," I said, my voice booming in the quiet kitchen. "You stand there dripping in garbage and you are worried about the suit." I stepped closer to him. He flinched. He was afraid of me. "Good. That water will wash out Dante," I said, pointing a finger at his chest. "A dry cleaner can fix that. But the stain on your soul, the black mark of treating your father like a dog, that doesn't wash out." I leaned in close, so only he could hear the steel in my voice. "I would rather wash dishes for the rest of my life than wash away your sins. I would rather sleep under a bridge than sleep in a house paid for by your greed. You want the money. You want the power. You are not ready for it. You are not a man. You are a boy playing dress-up in a man's suit, and now you are just a wet boy." Dante opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He looked around at the laughing customers, at the imposing figure of Big Earl, at his wife, who was frantically trying to wipe grease off her shoes. He realized he had lost. Not the war, but the battle. He had come to bully, and he had been broken. "Get out," Big Earl growled, pointing the cleaver at the door, "before I throw the rest of the trash out." Dante scrambled backwards, slipping on the wet floor, almost falling. He grabbed Jessica's arm and dragged her toward the exit. "You will pay for this, Dad," he shouted over his shoulder, but his voice lacked its usual venom. It was thin and watery. "You will regret this. I will leave you here to rot." I watched them run out the door, the bell jingling cheerfully behind them. They climbed into their black SUV and peeled away, leaving tire marks on the pavement. I stood there in the kitchen, breathing hard. My adrenaline was fading, leaving me tired and shaky. Big Earl walked over and put a massive hand on my shoulder. "That was some throw, Mr. Otis," he said, grinning. I looked at the mess on the floor. "I am sorry about the floor, Earl. I will clean it up." Earl shook his head. "Leave it. The boy can mop it. You sit down. You earned a break." I sat on a milk crate in the back alley listening to the city noises. I felt a strange sense of relief. I had drawn a line in the sand. I had declared my independence. But I knew this wasn't over. Dante was humiliated, and humiliated men are dangerous men. He wouldn't come back with threats next time. He would come back with lawyers. He would come back with the force of the system. He was going to try to prove I was insane. And after splashing him with dishwater, he might have a case if I wasn't careful. I needed to move. I needed to stay one step ahead. But for now, I just watched the steam rise from my coffee and smiled. The look on his face. It was worth every second of the cold. I touched the notebook in my pocket. Phase 1 was complete. He knew I couldn't be bullied. Now it was time for Phase 2. It was time to let the pressure cook him. It was time to let Vinny the shark and the bank start asking questions Dante couldn't answer. I finished my coffee, stood up, and walked back inside to grab a mop. I had a mess to clean up. But my conscience was spotless. The streets of the city have eyes and ears that people like my son Dante and his wife Jessica know nothing about. They live in a world of tinted windows and high-rise elevators, but I live in the world of the invisible. The janitors, the bus drivers, the security guards who stand in the lobby for 12 hours a day, while rich men walk past them without a glance. I spent 40 years being invisible in a steel mill, so I know how it works. You hear things when people think you are just part of the furniture. I was sitting in a small park near the library feeding pigeons with a stale bagel when a shadow fell over me. I did not flinch. I knew the shoes. Heavy work boots scuffed at the toe. Mr. Otis, a voice whispered. I looked up. It was Leon. I had known Leon since he was a skinny kid running the streets. 10 years ago, when he got in trouble with the law, I paid his bail anonymously so he could finish his GED. Now he worked the night shift cleaning offices in the legal district. Leon sat down on the bench next to me, not too close. He looked nervous. I saw your son last night, Mr. Otis, Leon said, keeping his voice low. He was at the office of a lawyer named Fletcher. Nasty piece of work, that Fletcher. He defends drug dealers and scammers. I nodded slowly, throwing another piece of bread to a gray pigeon. What was Dante doing there, Leon? He was with his wife, and they were meeting with a doctor, a guy named Dr. Thorne. They were talking loud, Mr. Otis. They thought the office was empty except for the cleaning crew. And what did they say? Leon swallowed hard. They are drawing up papers, Mr. Otis. Involuntary commitment papers. They are saying you have dementia, that you are a danger to yourself. This Dr. Thorne, he said he would sign the evaluation without even seeing you properly. He said for $5,000 he would swear you think you are Napoleon Bonaparte. They want to lock you up, Mr. Otis. They want to put you in a state facility so they can take conservatorship of your assets. I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach, darker and heavier than the winter chill. It was one thing to kick me out. It was one thing to steal. But to try and strip a man of his mind, to lock him away in a white room until he rotted just to get a signature that was evil. That was a level of betrayal I did not think even Dante was capable of. Jessica was driving this, I knew, but Dante was letting her hold the wheel. Thank you, Leon, I said, slipping him a $50 bill from my small stash. You keep your head down. I am not taking your money, Mr. Otis, Leon said, pushing it back. You saved my life once. I am just returning the favor. Watch your back. He walked away, blending into the morning crowd. I sat there for a long time. The pigeons cooed around my feet, oblivious to the treachery of the human heart. So that was the play, the legal trap. They wanted to paint me as senile. They wanted to use the law as a weapon. I could have run. I could have called Mr. Sterling and had him file an injunction. But that would have tipped my hand. That would have shown them I was lucid and fighting. No. If they wanted a crazy old man, I would give them a performance worthy of an Oscar. I went back to the public restroom in the library. I looked at myself in the mirror. I messed up my hair, pulling tufts of gray wool in different directions. I buttoned my shirt wrong, skipping a hole so the collar hung lopsided. I took one of my socks off and put it in my pocket so my ankles were bare and cold. Then I waited. It didn't take long. My phone, which I had turned back on, pinged with a message from Dante. Dad, we are worried about you. Please meet us. We want to make peace. We have a doctor friend who just wants to check your blood pressure. Please. For Mom. Using Betty's name to bait the trap. Low, very low. I texted back, typing slowly, making intentional typos. Okay, son. I am confused. Cold. Meet where? He sent an address. It wasn't a hospital. It was a private clinic in a strip mall on the edge of town, the kind of place that prescribed painkillers to anyone with cash. I took the bus. When I arrived, Dante and Jessica were waiting in the parking lot. They looked anxious, checking their watches. When they saw me shuffling across the asphalt, dragging my left leg, a little mumbling to myself, I saw the relief wash over them. They didn't see a father. They saw a payday. Dad, Dante said, rushing over. His voice was fake thick with performed concern. Oh, Dad, look at you. You are a mess. Who are you? I asked, squinting at him, my voice trembling. Are you the foreman? Is the shift over? Dante looked at Jessica and smirked, a cruel, satisfied smirk. It is worse than we thought, he said, loud enough for me to hear. He thinks he is back at the mill. This is perfect, Jessica whispered. Come on, Otis. Let's go inside. Nice doctor wants to give you some candy. Candy? She was talking to me like I was a toddler. I felt the bile rise in my throat, but I swallowed it down. I let them lead me inside. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and stale smoke. Dr. Thorne came out. He was a sweaty man with stains on his white coat and eyes that shifted around the room like a rat looking for an exit. So, this is the patient, Thorne said, looking me up and down with professional disinterest. Yes, Dante said. As you can see, doctor, my father is deeply confused. He has been wandering the streets. He doesn't know what year it is. We are very concerned for his safety. We need to take control of his affairs immediately to protect him. Thorne nodded. Bring him back. I sat on the crinkly paper of the exam table. I rocked back and forth, humming an old gospel tune under my breath, staring blankly at the wall. Dr. Thorne didn't check my blood pressure. He didn't check my eyes. He didn't ask me to count backward from 100. He just sat at his desk and pulled out a form. Mr. Freeman Thorne said, bored. Do you know where you are? I looked at him. My hand slipped into my pocket where my phone was already recording. I am in the break room, I mumbled. Betty packed me a ham sandwich. Did you see my lunchbox? Thorne looked at Dante. This is classic dementia, disorientation, regression. Just sign the papers, Dr. Jessica snapped, checking her nails. We don't have all day. Thorne leaned back, rubbing his thumb and forefinger together. The universal sign for greed. Well, it is a complicated diagnosis, he said, his eyes greedy. Usually requires weeks of observation. To expedite the process, to declare him fully incompetent today, that requires special expertise. We agreed on 5,000, Dante said, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. It was thick. Vinny's money, no doubt. Thorne took the envelope. He didn't even count it. He just weighed it in his hand and smiled. Of course, the symptoms are undeniable. Severe cognitive decline, unable to manage financial or personal affairs, immediate guardianship recommended. He started writing. The sound of his pen scratching on that paper was the sound of my freedom being signed away. Make sure you write that he is violent, Jessica added, just in case he tries to fight it later. If he is violent, we can sedate him. Thorne paused. Violent costs extra. Dante threw another stack of bills on the table. Just do it. I sat there rocking, humming, gripping the phone in my pocket. I was recording a felony. I was recording conspiracy fraud and medical malpractice. Thorne finished signing. He stamped the document with a heavy thud. Here you go. You are now the legal guardians of Mr. Otis Freeman. You have full power of attorney. You can commit him to any facility you choose. Jessica grabbed the paper. She looked at it like it was a winning lottery ticket. Finally, she breathed. She turned to me. The mask dropped completely. Did you hear that, old man? She sneered, leaning into my face. You belong to us now. No more games. No more running away. We own you. I looked up at her. I stopped rocking. I stopped humming. I let my eyes clear. I let the steelworker back into the room. Betty didn't like ham. I said, my voice clear and sharp as a razor. She liked turkey. Jessica blinked, confused by the sudden change in my demeanor. What? And I don't like liars. I continued, standing up from the table. My bad leg seemed to heal instantly. I stood to my full height, towering over the sweaty doctor. Dante stepped back. Dad. I pulled the phone from my pocket. I held it up so they could see the red recording light blinking. This is the iPhone 13 Pro, I said calmly. Excellent microphone. Picks up whispers from across the room. It definitely picked up the part about the $5,000. The room went deadly silent. Dr. Thorne's face turned the color of dirty ash. He scrambled to grab the envelope of money, trying to hide it in a drawer. That is privileged medical information, he stammered. You cannot record this. I am confused, doctor, I said, mocking my earlier tone. I thought I was incompetent. How can an incompetent man operate a smartphone? How can an incompetent man know that under state law, Section 402, fraud against a senior citizen is a mandatory 10-year sentence? Jessica lunged for the phone. Give me that. I stepped back, easily dodging her. Don't touch me, Jessica. That would be assault on a vulnerable adult. Another felony. Dante was shaking. Dad, please. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, son, I said, looking him in the eye. You tried to bury me before I was dead. You tried to sell my mind for $5,000. I looked at the doctor. You will be hearing from the medical board, Mr. Thorne, and the district attorney. I suggest you don't spend that money. You are going to need it for bail. I walked toward the door. They were too stunned to stop me. They were paralyzed by the sudden shift in power. They thought they had trapped a mouse and found a tiger in the cage. Wait! Dante screamed, running after me into the hallway. Dad, wait, we can fix this. I spun around. My voice echoed in the sterile corridor. Fix it, I roared. You broke it, Dante. You broke the last bond we had. You wanted me crazy. Well, I am crazy. Crazy with disappointment. I walked out of the clinic into the cold afternoon air. My heart was pounding, but my head was clear. I had the recording. I had the smoking gun. But I wasn't going to the police yet. Not today. Because putting them in jail was too easy. Jail would give them 3 meals a day and a roof over their heads. I wanted them to feel the panic. I wanted them to feel the walls closing in. I wanted them to face Vinny the shark with empty pockets and a father who knew all their secrets. I walked to the bus stop, my step lighter than it had been in days. They had tried to use the law to destroy me. Now the law was a noose around their necks, and I was just beginning to tighten the knot. The next step was the party. Their big inheritance gala. They were still going to throw it. They had to. They needed to keep up appearances. They needed to pretend they had won. And I was going to be the guest of honor, but not in the way they expected. I took out my notebook and found the number for a catering company, the one Jessica always used, the one that hired day laborers for cash. I had one more role to play, and this one was going to bring the house down. I walked through the service entrance of my own home wearing a white shirt that was too tight in the neck and a black vest that smelled of starch and other men's sweat. The catering manager, a woman named Brenda who shouted orders like a drill sergeant, handed me a silver tray loaded with crab cakes. She did not know my name. She just called me Pops and told me to keep the tray full and my mouth shut. If she had known that I laid the foundation of this house with my own hands back in 1982, she might have paused. But to her, I was just cheap labor. Another old man trying to make a few bucks to survive the winter. The house was unrecognizable. The warm yellow light Betty always loved was gone, replaced by harsh purple and blue mood lighting that made everyone look like they were underwater. The furniture, our furniture, was pushed against the walls or covered in white sheets. In the center of the living room, a makeshift bar had been set up right over the spot where I used to wrestle with Dante when he was a boy. The air was thick with the smell of expensive perfume, cigar smoke, and greed. I stepped into the room and the noise hit me. It wasn't the sound of friends laughing, it was the sound of a marketplace. It was the buzz of deals being made, of lies being sold. There were about 50 people crowded into my living room. I didn't recognize a single one of them. These weren't neighbors. These were sharks. Men in shiny suits with eyes that darted around the room, calculating the value of everything they saw. Women draped in jewelry that probably cost more than my pension. And there in the center of it all, holding court like a king, was Dante. He was wearing a tuxedo in his own living room. He held a crystal glass of whiskey in one hand, and he was gesturing wildly with the other. Jessica was clinging to his arm, wearing a dress that glittered like broken glass. She was laughing too loud, throwing her head back, exposing her long neck like a swan waiting for the blade. I lowered my head and moved through the crowd. I was invisible. I was the help. I offered crab cakes to men who didn't even look at me as they took them. I picked up empty glasses. I wiped condensation rings off the mahogany side tables Betty had polished every Saturday for 30 years. I made my way toward the center of the room. I needed to hear what he was selling. I stood behind a large potted palm tree tray in hand and listened. Gentleman Dante was saying, his voice booming with false confidence. The 55 million is just the seed capital. The Freeman Global Fund isn't just about preserving wealth, it is about multiplying it. We are looking at a 300% return in the first quarter, but buy-in is exclusive. We are only opening 5 spots tonight. I almost dropped the tray. He wasn't just bragging, he was running a Ponzi scheme. He was using the lottery money he didn't even have yet, as bait to lure investors into a trap. He was taking checks. I saw them. A man with a bald head and a diamond pinky ring was writing a check right there on my coffee table. Dante. You are a visionary, the bald man said, handing over the slip of paper. It is an honor to get in on the ground floor. The honor is mine, Dante said, tucking the check into his pocket. He looked high, not on drugs, but on adrenaline, on the sheer manic energy of the con. I stepped out from behind the palm tree. It was time. I walked straight up to him. The crowd parted for the server, not out of respect, but so they wouldn't get grease on their suits. Champagne, sir, I said, my voice low and gravelly. Dante turned around, a beaming smile plastered on his face, ready to charm another investor. Yes, keep them coming. We are. His voice died in his throat. The smile slid off his face like wet paint. His eyes went wide, so wide I could see the whites all around the irises. He stopped breathing. He looked at me. He looked at the server's uniform. He looked at my face, the face of the father he had betrayed, the father he had tried to declare insane just yesterday. For a second, I thought he was going to faint. The glass in his hand tilted dangerously, liquid sloshing over the rim. Jessica turned to see what was wrong. When she saw me, she gasped a sharp intake of air that sounded like a tire popping. She gripped Dante's arm so hard her knuckles turned white. Her face went pale beneath her heavy makeup. They were frozen. They were trapped. If they screamed, if they made a scene, if they called security, they would have to explain who I was. They would have to explain why the millionaire patriarch of the Freeman family was serving appetizers for minimum wage. They would have to admit that the house wasn't theirs. The image would shatter. The investors would pull their checks. The house of cards would fall. I held the tray steady. Crab cake. Dante, I asked, they are fresh. Dante opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked around the room in a panic. The investors were watching. They were waiting for him to take a hors d'oeuvre. They didn't see a father and son. They just saw a rich man and a servant. Take one, son, I whispered. You look hungry. Dante reached out a shaking hand. He took a crab cake. He put it in his mouth. He chewed mechanically, his eyes never leaving mine. He looked like he was chewing on glass. Delicious, sir, I said loud enough for the bald man to hear. Who is this character, Dante? The bald man asked, laughing. He has got a presence. Dante swallowed hard. He looked like he was going to be sick. Just the help, he stammered. Good help is hard to find. Is it? I asked, staring him down. I hear loyalty is even harder to find these days. Jessica stepped in, trying to salvage the moment. Her smile was terrified brittle. Thank you, server. Why don't you go check on the kitchen? I think we need more ice. She was dismissing me. She was trying to banish the ghost. I didn't move. Actually, ma'am, I think the ice is fine. But I noticed a stain on the rug. Right there. I pointed to a spot near Dante's feet. It was an old stain from years ago where I had spilled coffee. But to them, it was a threat. It was a reminder that I knew where the bodies were buried. Dante pulled a $100 bill from his pocket. His hand was trembling so bad he almost dropped it. Go take a break, he hissed through his teeth, his eyes pleading with me to disappear. Take the night off. Get out. I looked at the money. Vinny's money. Stolen money. I didn't take it. I am paid to do a job, sir, I said, and I always finish the job. I turned and walked away, weaving through the crowd, offering food to the vultures. I felt Dante's eyes burning a hole in my back. He was terrified. He was sweating through his tuxedo. Every time I walked near a guest, every time I opened my mouth, he flinched. He was waiting for me to scream. He was waiting for me to flip the table. But I didn't. That was the torture. The silence was the weapon. I circulated the room. I listened. I heard things that made my stomach turn. I heard Jessica telling a woman that I was in a luxury assisted living facility in Florida playing golf every day. Oh yes, Otis loves it there, she lied smoothly. He barely calls us. He is having so much fun spending his retirement. I heard Dante telling a group of men that he had built his fortune in tech before inheriting the family estate. Self-made, he said, tapping his chest. My father was a simple man, good heart but no head for business. I had to build this empire from scratch. Simple man, no head for business. I walked past him carrying a tray of empty glasses. Careful with that leverage, Dante, I whispered as I passed. Glass breaks easily. He whipped around, spilling his drink onto his shoes. What did you say? He hissed, grabbing my arm. I looked down at his hand on my sleeve, the same hand that had signed the fake medical papers. I said, watch your step, sir. The floor is slippery. He let go as if I were burning hot. I went back to the kitchen. Big Earl's cousin, a woman named Sarah, was running the plating station. You okay, Pops? She asked. You look like you want to kill someone. I am fine, Sarah, I said. Just watching the show. I wasn't just watching. I was documenting. I had a small camera pinned to my vest, part of the gear Mr. Sterling had given me. I was recording every lie, every fraudulent promise, every check handed over. This wasn't a party, it was a crime scene. And I was the lead investigator. Later in the evening, the mood shifted. The alcohol had done its work. The investors were loud, boisterous. Vinny the Shark was not there, but his presence hung over the room like a dark cloud. I knew Dante had promised to pay him tomorrow, with the money from these investors. He was robbing Peter to pay Paul, but Paul was a mobster, and Peter was about to bounce a check. I was clearing plates near the fireplace when Jessica cornered me. She had been drinking heavily. Her eyes were glassy and mean. Get out, she whispered, pulling me into the hallway near the bathroom. Get out of my house right now, or I will call the police and tell them you stole the silverware. I looked at her. She was pathetic. A desperate woman in a stolen dress. Your house, I asked calmly. I don't see your name on the deed, Jessica. It will be, she spat. As soon as you are gone. Why are you doing this? Why are you torturing us? Just give us the money. You are old. You are going to die soon anyway. Why do you need $55 million? Because I earned it, I said. And because I decide who is worthy of it. You are selfish, she hissed. You are a selfish, bitter old man. Maybe, I said, but at least I am not a thief. I pushed past her and went back to the party. The night ended with a toast. Dante stood on a chair, swaying slightly. To the future, he shouted, raising a glass. To the Freeman legacy. May it last 1,000 years. The vultures cheered. They drank his liquor and ate his food and promised him their money. I stood in the back holding a trash bag, watching my son celebrate a victory that was actually a funeral. He looked at me one last time across the room. His eyes were pleading. He looked like a little boy who had broken a window and was waiting for the belt. I didn't smile. I didn't wink. I just stared at him. I let him see the disappointment. I let him see the judgment. Then I turned and walked out the back door into the snow. I had done what I came to do. I had seen the depth of his deception. I had recorded the fraud, and I had let him know that I was not gone. I was right here, in the shadows, in the corner of his eye. He wouldn't sleep tonight. He would be waiting for the police. He would be waiting for me to come back, but I wasn't coming back. Not yet. Tomorrow was Sunday. The banks were closed, but Monday morning those checks he collected tonight would hit the clearinghouse, and Mr. Sterling had a surprise waiting for them. And Vinny the Shark was waiting for his money. The pressure cooker was sealed tight, and I had just turned up the gas. I walked to the bus stop, the music from the party fading behind me. I took off the bow tie and the vest and threw them in a trash can. I wasn't a server anymore. I was the executioner, and the blade was falling. The air in the living room was getting stale thick with the smell of expensive cologne and cheap desperation. I was moving through the crowd like a ghost, gathering empty champagne flutes and dirty napkins. My white server shirt was already stained with sweat and grease, but I kept my back straight. I was not just a waiter. I was a spy in the house of the enemy. The party was reaching that dangerous point where the alcohol stops making people happy and starts making them mean. The investors were getting loud, their jokes sharper, their eyes glazing over with the promise of easy money. Dante was in the corner sweating through his tuxedo, trying to keep a man from New York interested in a real estate project that didn't exist. But my eyes were on Jessica. She was holding court on the white leather sofa my wife Betty had saved for 3 years to buy. Jessica had covered it with a sequined throw to hide the fact that it was 10 years old, but she couldn't hide her own nature. She was drunk not just on the wine, but on the power. She was the queen of the evening, the hostess with the mostest, the woman who had married the golden goose. She saw me coming. I saw her eyes lock onto me, and a cruel little smile played on her lips, painted a blood red that matched the wine in her glass. She waved me over, snapping her fingers like I was a dog. "Server," she called out, her voice cutting through the chatter. "We need a refill here, and be quick about it." I walked over. I kept my head down, playing the part. I reached for her glass to refill it. She didn't wait. With a flick of her wrist so casual it looked like an accident to everyone but me, she tipped the glass. The red wine splashed across the front of my shirt. It soaked into the white fabric like a gunshot wound blooming across my chest. It splattered onto my pants, and crucially, it splashed onto her shoes. Those shoes. She had been bragging about them all night. Louboutins, she had told anyone who would listen. $1,200, imported from Paris. She gasped a theatrical sound of shock that silenced the immediate circle of guests. "Look what you did," she shrieked, jumping up. "You clumsy idiot. You ruined my dress. You ruined my shoes." The music didn't stop, but the conversation did. 50 heads turned. Dante looked over from across the room, his face draining of color. He saw his wife screaming at the help. He saw the investors watching. He started to move toward us, but he was too slow. I stood there, the wine cold against my skin. I didn't apologize because I hadn't done anything. "I am sorry, ma'am," I said, my voice calm. The glass slipped. "It didn't slip, you threw it at me," she yelled, playing to the crowd. "Look at this mess. Look at my shoes. Do you have any idea how much these cost? These are designer. These are worth more than your life." She pointed at her feet. The red soles gleamed under the harsh party lights. "Clean it up," she ordered. I looked at her. I looked at the napkin in my hand. "I will get a mop, ma'am," I said, turning to go to the kitchen. "No," she barked. "Now. Clean it now. Before it stains the leather. Get down there and clean my shoes." The room went deadly quiet. Even the music seemed to fade away. This wasn't just a rude hostess anymore. This was a spectacle. This was humiliation for sport. Dante froze halfway across the room. He knew he should stop this. He knew this was dangerous, but he was weak. He was afraid of her. And he was afraid of the investors thinking he couldn't control his own household. So he stayed put, watching his father being ordered to kneel. I looked around the room. I saw the faces of the guests. Some looked uncomfortable, shifting their weight. Others looked amused, the way people look at a car crash. They were waiting to see if the old man would break. They wanted to see me kneel. So I did. I lowered myself slowly to one knee. My joints popped in the silence. I bowed my head. I took the white napkin from my tray. Jessica smiled. It was a smile of pure triumph. She thought she had won. She thought she had broken the last shred of my dignity. She stuck her foot out, waiting for me to wipe the wine from her heel. I reached out. I took her foot in my hand. It was trembling slightly, not from fear but from adrenaline. I wiped the toe of the shoe. Then I wiped the heel. I cleaned the red wine from the red sole. And then I stopped. I held her foot there for a second longer than necessary. I looked closely at the sole. I ran my thumb over the red paint. I knew luxury. Betty and I might have lived simple lives, but we knew quality. When we won the lottery, Betty bought one pair of real Louboutins. She kept them in the box in her closet and only wore them on our anniversary. I knew the weight of them. I knew the stitching. I knew the way the red lacquer was applied to the sole. This shoe in my hand was light. The stitching was uneven, and the red sole was just cheap paint peeling slightly at the edge where the wine had hit it. I looked up. Jessica was looking down at me, expecting submission. I leaned forward. I moved my face close to hers, so close I could smell the expensive gin on her breath. I whispered so only she could hear, but my voice was hard as diamond. "You got ripped off, Jessica." Her smile faltered. "What? These shoes?" I whispered, my hand still holding her foot. "They are fakes. Knock-offs. Canal Street specials. Just like the purse you are carrying. Just like the ring on your finger." Her eyes went wide. The panic started to rise in her chest. "And just like you, I finished. You are a fake, Jessica. You are playing dress-up in a house that isn't yours, spending money you don't have, wearing shoes you couldn't afford, even if they were real. You are nothing but a cheap copy." She yanked her foot away from my grip. She stumbled back, losing her balance for a second. Her face turned a violent shade of red that matched the wine on my shirt. She didn't think. She didn't calculate. She just reacted. She swung her hand. The slap echoed through the room like a pistol shot. It hit me square on the cheek. It stung. My head snapped to the side, my hat fell off. The silence that followed was absolute. I stayed there on one knee for a heartbeat. I let the sting fade. I let the red mark on my face bloom. Then I slowly turned my head back to look at her. I didn't touch my face. I didn't shout. I just looked at her with eyes that had seen molten steel pour at 2,000 degrees. She was breathing hard, her chest heaving. She realized too late what she had done. Phones were up. I saw them. The bald investor with the pinky ring was recording. A woman in a blue dress was live streaming. She had just slapped an elderly servant in the middle of a party. She had just assaulted a senior citizen on camera. Otis Dante screamed, rushing forward, finally finding his legs. "Jessica, what are you doing?" Jessica looked around wild-eyed. "He insulted me," she shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. "He insulted me, Dante! Throw him out!" I stood up slowly. I picked up my hat. I dusted off my knee. I looked at Dante. He was terrified. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the investors. He saw their faces. He saw the disgust. He saw the checks they had written mentally evaporating. "I am leaving, sir," I said, my voice projecting to the back of the room. "I don't need to be thrown out." I turned to the guests. "I apologize for the disturbance, folks. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Be careful with the investments, though. Sometimes things aren't as solid as they look." I walked toward the door. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. They looked at me with a mix of pity and awe. They looked at the red handprint on my face. Jessica was crying now, hysterical tears of rage and humiliation. "He is crazy," she was yelling. "He is a crazy old man." But nobody was listening to her. They were looking at the video replays on their phones. They were whispering. I walked out the front door and down the steps. The cold air hit my face, cooling the burn of the slap. I walked down the driveway, past the neon green Lamborghini, past the rented luxury cars. I reached the street and kept walking. I touched my cheek. It hurt, but it was a good hurt. It was the hurt of a trap snapping shut. She had given me exactly what I needed. Assault, battery, elder abuse, recorded by 20 witnesses. I pulled out my phone and dialed Mr. Sterling. "Otis," he answered on the first ring. "It is done," I said. "She hit me. On camera." Sterling let out a breath. "Are you okay?" "I am fine. Better than fine." "Is Vinny watching?" "He is," Sterling said. "My contact says Vinny has seen the live stream. He knows the party is a disaster. He knows the investors are walking." "Good," I said. "And the bank?" "They saw the transaction alert," Sterling said. "They know Dante is trying to kite checks. The freeze is absolute, Otis. As of tomorrow morning, his cards won't even buy a pack of gum." I hung up. I looked back at the house. I could see shadows moving in the window. I could see arms waving. The party was over. The hangover was just beginning. Jessica thought she had humiliated me. She thought she had put the servant in his place, but she didn't know the servant was the landlord, and the landlord just canceled the lease. I walked into the night, my face burning, my heart cold. Tomorrow was Monday. The banks would open. The lawyers would file the motions. And Dante and Jessica would wake up to a world where the floor had simply vanished. I had 30 days to teach them a lesson. But I think I only needed about 3 more. Because Vinny the shark was coming. And unlike me, Vinny didn't slap. Vinny bit. I headed for the subway. I had one more stop to make before I disappeared completely. I needed to see an old friend. A man who knew how to make sure a video went viral. Because if Jessica wanted an audience, I was going to give her the biggest audience in the world. The snow on the streets of Pittsburgh had turned to gray slush, the kind that seeps into your boots and rots the leather. It had been 7 days since the party. 7 days since I walked out of that house, leaving my son and his wife standing in the ruins of their social climbing ambitions. I was staying in a small efficiency apartment Mr. Sterling had arranged for me on the other side of town. It was warm. It was quiet. But I spent most of my time watching the screen of my laptop, monitoring the security feeds from the house I built. I wasn't watching out of nostalgia. I was watching the pressure cooker. You see, in the steel mill, we had these pressure gauges on the blast furnaces. If the needle went into the red, you had to vent it or the whole thing would blow sky high. Dante had been living in the red for a week. The investors from the party had canceled their checks the moment the first rumors of fraud started circulating. The bank had locked down the accounts so tight a germ couldn't slip through, and the phone calls from Vinny the Shark Moretti had stopped. That was the worst sign. When a man like Vinny stops calling, it means he is done talking. It means he is on his way. It was 6 in the morning. The sky was the color of a bruised plum. The streetlights were still buzzing overhead. On the security camera feed, I saw a black van roll slowly down the street. It didn't have plates. It moved like a hearse stalking a graveyard. It stopped right in front of my driveway, right in front of that neon green Lamborghini Urus Dante had bought with the loan shark's money. The car was covered in a light dusting of snow, looking like a radioactive lime popsicle left out in the freezer. 2 men got out of the van. They were big. They wore thick coats and ski masks. They didn't look around. They didn't care who saw. This was not a stealth mission. This was a billboard. One of them carried a heavy 5-gallon bucket. He walked up to the Lamborghini. He didn't hesitate. He swung the bucket in a wide arc. Thick, viscous red paint splashed across the windshield, over the hood, and down the grille. It looked violent. It looked like a crime scene. In the gray light of dawn, the red was shocking. The second man pulled a baseball bat from his coat. He didn't smash the windows. That would be too easy. Instead, he walked up to the driver's side door and swung hard at the side mirror. It shattered plastic, flying onto the snow. Then he took a piece of paper from his pocket and slapped it onto the wet paint on the hood. They got back in the van and drove away. The whole thing took less than 45 seconds. I sat in my warm apartment sipping my coffee, feeling a cold knot in my stomach. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel victory. I felt the heavy sadness of a father watching his son learn that fire actually burns. An hour later, the front door of the house opened. Dante stepped out in his bathrobe. He was holding a mug of coffee, looking out at the morning, expecting to see his kingdom. Instead, he saw the blood-red paint dripping off his $300,000 dream. He dropped the mug. I couldn't hear it shatter through the camera feed, but I saw it explode on the porch steps. He ran down the driveway, slipping on the ice in his bare feet. He touched the paint. It was still wet. He looked at the shattered mirror. He looked at the note stuck to the hood. He peeled it off. His hands were shaking so bad he almost tore it. I knew what it said without reading it. It was the invoice. The bill was due. Dante screamed. It was a silent scream on my monitor, his mouth wide open, his face twisted in pure terror. He looked around the street, paranoid, expecting Vinny to be watching from the bushes. He ran back inside, slamming the door. I switched the feed to the interior cameras. Dante was in the kitchen, pacing back and forth, pulling at his hair. He looked terrible. He hadn't shaved in days. His eyes were sunk deep into his skull, dark circles bruising the skin underneath. He looked like a man who hadn't slept since the night I left. Jessica came into the kitchen wearing a silk robe that was probably stolen or bought on a maxed-out credit card. She looked at him with disdain. "What is it now, Dante?" she snapped. "Why are you screaming? It is 7 in the morning." He threw the paint-covered note onto the island counter. "Read it," he choked out. "Just read it." Jessica picked it up. She read it. Her face went pale. "Double or nothing," the note said. "You have 24 hours, or we take the house and a pound of flesh." 24 hours, Jessica whispered. "We don't have 24 hours, Dante. We don't have $24. We have to leave," Dante said, his voice rising to a hysterical pitch. "We have to run. We can take the car and—" "Oh God, we can't take the car. The car is marked. They know the car." He grabbed Jessica's shoulders, shaking her. "Vinny isn't playing, Jess. He knows where we live. He knows everything. If we don't pay him $400,000 by tomorrow, he is going to kill me. He is going to kill us both." Jessica slapped his hands away. "Stop it. Stop panicking. You are useless when you panic." "What do we do?" Dante cried, sliding down the cabinets until he was sitting on the floor, head in his hands. "The bank won't open the accounts. The investors are gone. I tried to sell the watches, but the pawn shop said they were fake." "Of course they were fake. I knew that. Everything in their life was fake except the debt." Jessica stood there staring at the refrigerator. I could see the gears turning in her head. She was calculating. She was looking for an exit. "There is only one way," she said quietly. What Dante asked, looking up, his eyes red and wet. "Your father," she said. Dante laughed, a bitter, broken sound. Dad hates us." "I threw him out in the snow, Jess. I humiliated him. I tried to declare him insane. He isn't going to help us. He has to." Jessica said, her voice gaining strength. "He is the key, Dante. Literally. The lawyer Sterling said the trust requires biometric authorization. That means Otis. We don't need him to love us. We don't need him to forgive us. We just need his thumbprint. We just need his eye." How Dante asked, getting up. "He is gone. He disappeared." "He is an old man," Jessica said, pacing the kitchen. "He has no money. He has no car. He can't have gone far. He is probably in a shelter, or sleeping on a grate somewhere. She turned to Dante, her eyes blazing with a new, desperate intensity. We find him. We bring him back here. We tell him we are sorry. We cry, we beg. We tell him we made a mistake. We tell him Vinny is going to kill us. He is a father, Dante. He is soft. He has always been soft. If he sees you crying, if he sees you in danger, he will cave. He will sign whatever we put in front of him just to save his little boy. I watched from my apartment, my coffee growing cold in my hand. He is soft, she said. She didn't know that steel is forged in fire. She didn't know that 40 years in a mill turns a man's skin to leather. She didn't know that the softness she remembered was a choice, not a weakness. And I had made a new choice. Dante wiped his face. You really think he will help? He doesn't have a choice, Jessica said, grabbing her purse. If Vinny kills us, who is going to take care of him? We are his retirement plan, Dante. He needs us just as much as we need him. Now get dressed. We are going to every soup kitchen and homeless shelter in this city until we find him. They moved with a frantic energy now, the energy of the damned. They thought they were going on a rescue mission. They thought they could just scoop me up out of the gutter, dust me off, and use me like a key to unlock their salvation. They didn't realize that by bringing me back into that house, they were inviting the judge, the jury, and the executioner right into their living room. I closed the laptop. They were coming for me. Not to kill me this time, but to use me. It was time to be found. But I wasn't going to make it easy, and I wasn't going to go back as the victim. I picked up my phone and called Mr. Sterling. They are coming, I said. Good, Sterling replied. Is the trap set? It is, I said. Vinny scared them straight, or at least scared them desperate. They are going to scour the city. Where will you be? Sterling asked. I will be at the shelter on 9th Street, I said. The one near the river. It is the worst one in the city. If they find me there, they will think I am broken. They will think I am desperate. It will make their lie easier to swallow. And Otis Sterling added, his voice serious. Remember the clause. 30 days. If you go back, you have to endure it. You cannot break character. You cannot let them know you have the power until the clock runs out. I know, I said. 22 days left, Sterling said. Can you do it? I looked at the image of the red paint on the snow on my screen. I looked at the fear in my son's eyes. I can do it, I said. Because I am not doing it for me anymore. I am doing it for Betty. And I am doing it to save my son from himself. I hung up. I put on my old coat. I rubbed some dirt on my face to look the part. I walked out of the warm apartment and headed back toward the misery of the streets. I was going back to hell. But this time I was bringing the matches. Dante wanted his father back. Well, he was going to get him. He was going to get every inch of Otis Freeman, and by the time I was done with him, he would wish he had just let Vinny break his legs. The hunt was over. The trap was sprung. Now we just had to see who would survive the cage. The 9th Street shelter smelled like wet wool and lost hope. I was sitting on a cot in the corner watching the door. I knew they were coming. I had felt it in my bones the same way I used to feel a storm coming in off the river when I worked the yard. The trap I had set with Mr. Sterling was baited and snapped, and now the rats were running for the only safety they thought they had left. I had been there for 4 hours when the heavy metal doors swung open. The shelter volunteer, a kind woman named Mabel, looked up from her desk, surprised to see 2 people who looked like they had taken a wrong turn on their way to a country club. Dante burst in first. He looked wrecked. His hair was wild, his eyes were bloodshot, and he was wearing a coat that cost more than this entire building, but he was shivering, not from the cold, from fear. Vinny. The shark had put the fear of God into him, and now he was looking for his savior. Jessica was right behind him. She was wearing big sunglasses, probably to hide the fact that she had been crying, or maybe to hide the shame of stepping foot in a place like this. She looked around the room at the rows of cots, at the men huddled in blankets, and she shuddered. She looked like she was afraid she might catch poverty just by breathing the air. Then Dante saw me. I was sitting with my back against the wall, my hat pulled low over my eyes. I didn't move. I didn't wave. I just watched. "Dad!" he shouted, his voice cracking. He didn't care who heard. He ran across the room, dodging between the cots. He fell to his knees right in front of me. He didn't care about the dirty floor. He didn't care about his pants. "Dad. Oh God, Dad, I am so sorry." He grabbed my hands. His hands were freezing and clammy. He buried his face in my lap and started to sob. It was a pathetic sound. A sound of a man who has realized he is not the king of the world, but just a pawn in a game he doesn't understand. "I am so sorry, Dad," he blubbered. "I don't know what happened. I don't know what came over me. The grief. Losing Mom. It made me crazy. I wasn't thinking straight. Please, Dad, you have to forgive me." I looked down at the top of his head. I remembered holding him when he was a baby. I remembered teaching him to ride a bike. I remembered the day I carried him on my shoulders at the Union Parade. Where had that boy gone? Was he still in there somewhere buried under layers of greed and fear? Or was this performance just fear of Vinny? Jessica walked up slowly. She stood behind him. She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red, but they were dry. She wasn't crying, she was calculating. "Otis," she said, her voice trembling just enough to sound convincing. "We were so worried. When we saw you were gone, we panicked. We drove all over the city. We called hospitals. We thought we lost you." She knelt down too. It looked painful for her. She put a hand on my shoulder. "Please come home," she said. "The house is empty without you. It isn't a home without you. We want to take care of you. We want to make it right. We want to be a family again." I listened to their words. They were the right words. They were the words a father wants to hear. But I knew the truth. I knew about the fake medical papers. I knew about the stolen money. I knew about the red paint on the Lamborghini. They didn't want me. They wanted my signature. They wanted access to the trust fund so they could pay off the loan shark before he started breaking bones. But I had a role to play. I had 30 days to endure, 30 days to test them. I looked at Dante. I pulled my hand away from his grip slowly. "You threw me out, son," I said, my voice raspy and weak. "You took my keys. You told me to go die." I know Dante cried. I know, and I will regret it for the rest of my life. I was sick, Dad. The stress, the pressure. But I am better now. I see clearly now. Please, let us take you home. You shouldn't be here. This place is... It is not for you. I looked around the shelter. "It is warm here," I said. "People are kind." "No," Jessica said quickly. "No, Otis. You belong with us, in your room, with your things. We will cook for you. We will clean for you. You won't have to lift a finger. Just come home." I let the silence hang in the air. I let them sweat. I watched Dante looking at the door as if he expected Vinny to walk in any second. "Okay," I said finally. "I will come home." Dante let out a breath that sounded like a tire deflating. "Thank you, Dad. Thank you. You won't regret it." He stood up and tried to help me rise. I pushed him away gently. "I can stand," I said. "But there is a condition." "Condition?" Jessica asked, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Anything, Otis. Anything you want. I am not coming alone." Dante looked around confused. "What do you mean? Who else is there?" I whistled. A sharp, short sound. From under the cot next to mine, a shadow moved. A low growl vibrated through the floorboards. A dog emerged. It was the stray from the bus stop, the one that had followed me through the snow. I had named him Beast. He was a mix of everything tough. Pit bull shepherd, maybe some wolf. He was huge, scarred, and missing half an ear. He smelled like wet fur in alleyways. He stood up and shook himself, sending dust flying. He looked at Dante and bared his teeth. A low rumble started in his chest. "This is Beast," I said, petting his massive head. "He stays with me." Jessica recoiled, covering her nose. "That thing. Otis, that is a wild animal. It is filthy. It probably has fleas." "He saved me from freezing," I said. "He kept me warm when my own family put me in the cold. If I go, he goes. If he stays, I stay." Dante looked at the dog, then at me, then at Jessica. He was doing the math. A flea-ridden dog versus a broken leg from Vinny. "Fine," Dante said quickly. "The dog comes. Whatever. Just let's go." "No," Jessica said, stamping her foot. "Absolutely not. I am not having a stray beast in my house. It will ruin the carpets. It will smell up the furniture." "Otis, be reasonable." I sat back down on the cot. Beast sat down next to me and rested his heavy head on my knee, staring at Jessica with yellow, unblinking eyes. "I am being reasonable," I said. "This is my family now, Jessica. You made your choice. I made mine." Dante grabbed Jessica's arm and pulled her aside. I could hear them whispering. "Let him bring the damn dog," Jess, Dante hissed. "We need him. Once he signs the papers, we can get rid of the dog. We can take it to the pound. Just get him in the car." Jessica looked at me, then at the dog, then at Dante. She took a deep breath. She forced a smile that looked like a grimace of pain. "Okay," she said. "Beast can come, But he stays in the basement. He sleeps in my room, I said, at the foot of my bed, and he eats what I eat. Fine, Jessica snapped. Fine. Can we go now? There is one more thing, I said. What now, Dad? Dante asked, his patience fraying at the edges. I am hungry, I said, standing up slowly. And so is Beast. We haven't eaten a good meal in days. We will pick up food on the way home, Dante said. We will get drive-through. No, I said. I want a home-cooked meal. Jessica rolled her eyes. I will order catering. No, I repeated. I looked directly at Jessica. I want you to cook. Me? Jessica asked, offended. I don't cook, Otis. You know that. We have people for that. You sent the people away, I said. And besides, a daughter-in-law should cook for her family. It shows respect. I want a steak, I said, medium rare, and mashed potatoes, and greens, like Betty used to make. Jessica looked like she was going to scream. She looked at her manicured nails. She looked at her silk dress. And Beast, I added, scratching the dog behind the ears. He likes steak too. 2 steaks. One for me. One for him. Cooked by you, Jessica. Tonight. You want me to cook a steak for a dog? She asked, her voice rising an octave. He is a guest, I said. And he has better manners than some people I know. Dante stepped in. She will do it, Dad. She loves cooking. Right, Jess. He glared at his wife, a look of pure desperation. Do it, his eyes said. Do it, or we are dead. Jessica swallowed her pride. It must have tasted bitter. I would love to cook for you, Otis, she lied through clenched teeth. And for Beast. Good, I said. I picked up my suitcase. Beast stood up and shook himself again, sending a cloud of shelter dust into the air. Lead the way, son, I said. We walked out of the shelter. Dante walked in front, trying to look dignified. Jessica walked behind, trying not to touch anything. I walked in the middle with Beast at my side. When we got to the SUV, Dante opened the back door. The leather seats were pristine, cream-colored soft. Beast didn't wait for an invitation. He jumped in, muddy paws and all. He circled 3 times on the leather seat, scratching it with his claws before settling down. Jessica let out a small whimper as she saw the mud on the upholstery. I climbed in next to him. The car was warm. It smelled of new money and old debt. As we drove away from the shelter, I looked out the window. I was going back to the house I built. But I wasn't going back as the victim. I was going back as the warden. The clock had started. 30 days. They thought they had rescued me. They thought they had solved their problem, but they didn't know that the real problem was sitting in the back seat stroking a dog that looked like a wolf. And they didn't know that Vinny wasn't the only one who was going to demand payment. I leaned back and closed my eyes. I imagined Jessica in the kitchen wearing an apron trying to figure out how to cook a steak. It was a small victory, but it tasted sweet. Tonight the dog would eat like a king, and tomorrow the real test would begin. I patted the pocket where the notebook was hidden. Welcome home, Otis, I whispered to myself. Let the games begin. The first week back in my own house was like living in a theater where the actors hated the audience but needed the ticket sales to survive. The air conditioning was running, but Dante and Jessica were sweating. They walked around on eggshells, terrified that one wrong move would send me walking back out the door and straight to a lawyer to cut them off for good. I found out why they were being so compliant on the second morning. I was coming down the stairs early, my joints stiff from the damp weather, when I heard them whispering in the kitchen. They were huddled over a piece of paper, a photocopy of a fax Dante had managed to snag from Mr. Sterling's office during a previous meeting. It was a draft of the will clause. 30 days, Dante was whispering, his voice frantic. It says right here, Jess. The beneficiary must provide care for 30 days. We just have to keep him alive and in the house for a month. Then the trust unlocks. Jessica was tracing the line with her manicured fingernail. 30 days, she hissed. We can do 30 days. It is like a prison sentence. We just serve the time and then we get the money. We feed him, we wash him, we keep him happy. And on day 31, we dump him. I stood on the stairs in the shadows and smiled. They had read the words, but they had missed the music. They missed the part about sincerity. They missed the part about the care being genuine. They thought this was a transaction. I decided right then that if they wanted to treat my life like a contract, I was going to make sure they read the fine print in sweat and tears. I walked into the kitchen. They jumped apart like guilty teenagers hiding the paper behind a cereal box. Good morning, Dad, Dante said, his smile bright and fake. Can I get you some coffee? No coffee, I said, sitting down at the head of the table. Beast trotted in and sat next to me, resting his heavy head on my thigh. I want to do laundry. Jessica let out a sigh of relief. Oh, of course, Otis. The housekeeper is coming tomorrow. Just leave your bag by the door and she will take care of it. I shook my head slowly. No housekeeper. I fired her, remember? We are cutting costs. Dante frowned. Okay, well, we have a washer and dryer. Top of the line. I can throw your things in. No machines, I said. They both looked at me confused. I want my clothes washed by hand, I said. My work clothes. The ones in the bottom of the suitcase. They have oil stains from 20 years ago. Machines don't get that out. You need elbow grease. I looked at Dante. You, son. I want you to wash them. In the utility sink in the basement. With a scrub board and bar soap. Just like my mother used to do. Dante laughed nervously, waiting for the punchline. Dad, come on. That is ridiculous. We have a $3,000 washing machine. Why would I scrub old rags by hand? Because it builds character, I said, my voice hardening. And because I asked you to. Dante's face flushed. I am not doing that. I am a businessman, Dad. I don't scrub laundry. I stood up slowly. I reached for my coat, which was hanging on the back of the chair. Okay, I said. Then I guess I will go find a laundromat. Maybe I will stay there. It was quiet at the shelter. Panic flashed in Dante's eyes. He looked at the calendar on the wall. He was counting the days. He knew if I left the clock reset, or worse, the deal was off. Wait, he stammered, moving to block the door. Fine. I will do it. Put the coat down, Dad, please. I sat back down. The basement. The bar soap is under the sink. And Dante, I want them white. 10 minutes later, I went down to the basement to supervise. Dante had stripped off his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves. He was wearing a silk shirt that cost probably $200, and he was leaning over a plastic utility sink filled with gray, soapy water. He was holding my old mill coveralls. They were heavy stiff with old grease and sweat. He looked like he was holding a dead animal. He dipped them in the water and rubbed them half-heartedly against the metal ridges of the washboard. Harder, I said from the stairs. You have to put your back into it. Dante groaned. This is insane, he muttered. My hands are going to be ruined. Your hands are soft, I said. They have never done a day of real work. Maybe this will toughen them up. He scrubbed for 2 hours. I watched him sweat. I watched the soapy water turn dark gray. I watched his knuckles turn red and raw. He kept looking at me, expecting me to tell him to stop, expecting me to say lesson learned. But I didn't. I let him finish. When he hung the heavy, wet clothes on the line, his hands were shaking. He looked exhausted. He looked humbled. Good job, son, I said. Now you know how I paid for your first bicycle. He didn't answer. He just walked past me, his eyes full of hate. He was banking that hate, saving it for day 31. But he did the work. That night, it was Jessica's turn. It was dinner time. Jessica had set the table. She had ordered takeout from a Thai place nearby, trying to hide the containers in the kitchen so I wouldn't see. She plated the food on our nice china, trying to make it look homemade. I sat down. I looked at the pad thai. I looked at the spring rolls. I pushed the plate away. I don't want this, I said. Jessica's smile twitched. What do you mean, Otis? It is delicious. It is shrimp. You love shrimp. It is expensive, I said. We are in debt, Jessica. We owe Vinny. We owe the banks. We can't afford takeout. It was only $40, she argued. $40 is a week of groceries if you shop right, I said. Take it away. She stared at me. So what are we supposed to eat? I reached into the grocery bag I had brought back from the store earlier that day. I pulled out a bag of dried pinto beans, a bag of white rice, and a can of Spam. This, I said. This is what we ate when Dante was a baby and the mill was on strike. This is what keeps you alive when you have nothing. You want me to eat beans? Jessica asked, her voice flat with disbelief. I want you to cook them, I said. And I want you to eat them. No meat, no wine, just beans and rice. I am not eating Spam, she said, crossing her arms. That is dog food. Beast lifted his head from under the table and whined. Don't insult the dog, I said. Beast gets the Spam. You get the beans. She looked at Dante for support. Dante was nursing his raw hands, nursing a glass of water because I had poured his scotch down the sink earlier. Just do it, Jess, Dante mumbled, staring at the table. Just cook the beans. Jessica grabbed the bag of beans so hard the plastic nearly ripped. She marched into the kitchen. I could hear her slamming pots and pans. I could hear her cursing under her breath. I sat there with Dante in the silence. "You think this is funny, don't you?" Dante said quietly. "You think it is funny to humiliate us?" I leaned forward. "Funny, no, son. This isn't funny. Funny is watching you drive a Lamborghini you didn't earn. Funny is watching you throw your father into the snow. This isn't funny. This is reality. This is what life looks like when you strip away the lies." The beans took 2 hours to cook because Jessica didn't know you had to soak them first. They were crunchy. The rice was mushy. It was a terrible meal, but we ate it. Jessica sat there picking at a single hard bean on her fork, her face a mask of misery. She was used to arugula salads and seared tuna. She was used to wine pairings. Now she was eating poverty stew in a house she thought she owned. "Eat up," I said, taking a big spoonful. "It sticks to your ribs." "I am not hungry," she whispered, pushing the plate away. "You will be," I promised. Hunger is a great teacher. The rest of the week went by in a blur of petty tortures that were really just lessons in survival. I made Dante mow the lawn with the old push mower even though it was winter and there was no grass just to clear the snow from the walkways. I made Jessica mend my old socks with a needle and thread. I made them turn off the heat at night to save electricity, forcing them to sleep under piles of blankets like I had done under the bridge. Every day they looked more tired. Every day the veneer of their high society life cracked a little more. Their clothes were wrinkled because they couldn't afford the dry cleaner. Dante's stubble grew in gray and patchy. Jessica's roots started to show. They were starting to look like the people they despised. But they didn't leave. They didn't quit. They endured it all with a silent, simmering rage because they were counting down the days. 7 days down, Dante whispered to Jessica one night in the hallway, thinking I was asleep. "Just 23 more. We can do this. We can survive him." He thought the hard part was the physical labor. He thought the test was about endurance. He didn't realize the real test hadn't even started yet. On Sunday night of the first week, I was sitting in the living room reading the Bible Betty had left on the nightstand. Dante and Jessica were in the kitchen washing the bean pot, arguing in hushed tones about whose turn it was to scrub. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Mr. Sterling. "Vinny knows you are back in the house. He thinks Dante has access to the money now. He is coming for a collection visit tomorrow." I closed the Bible. The first week was boot camp. I had broken down their bodies. I had broken down their pride. But now the outside world was coming crashing in. Dante thought he was protecting his inheritance by keeping me there. He didn't realize he had just trapped himself in a house with a debt he couldn't pay. I looked at the calendar on the wall. Week 1 was over. Week 2 was going to be violent. I called out to them. "Kids," I shouted. "Get some rest. We have big day tomorrow." Dante poked his head out of the kitchen. "What is happening tomorrow, Dad?" I smiled. A smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Visitors," I said. "Old friends." Dante looked relieved. He probably thought I meant neighbors or church folk. He probably thought he could charm them, play the good son. He had no idea that the visitors were bringing baseball bats and bad news. I turned off the lamp and went upstairs to my room. Beast followed me, his nails clicking on the hardwood. I slept soundly that night. I knew my son wouldn't. Not when he found out who was knocking at the door. The pressure cooker was whistling, and the lid was about to blow off. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. The sky was a bruised purple, heavy with unshed snow, and the air inside the house was thick with a tension that had nothing to do with the weather. Dante was pacing the living room, his hands shaking as he tried to tie his tie. He was dressed for a business meeting that didn't exist, a desperate attempt to armor himself against the reality of his life. Jessica was in the kitchen aggressively chopping fruit, the knife hitting the cutting board with a violence that betrayed her nerves. I sat in my leather armchair, the one Dante had tried to throw away, and watched the steam rise from my cup of Earl Grey tea. Beast was curled at my feet, his ears twitching, sensing something I couldn't hear yet. I knew today was the day. Vinny the shark didn't give grace periods. He didn't do extensions. Monday meant payment or Monday meant pain. The explosion happened at 9 o'clock sharp. There was no knock, there was no doorbell. Just a thunderous crash that shook the picture frames on the walls. The front door, solid oak and heavy, flew open, the deadbolt splintering the doorframe like it was made of balsa wood. Dante screamed a high-pitched sound that shamed me to my core. He scrambled backward, tripping over the rug, knocking over a lamp. Jessica dropped her knife in the kitchen and ran into the living room, her eyes wide with terror. 3 men walked in. They brought the cold with them. In the lead was Vinny. He wasn't a giant, but he carried himself with the density of a neutron star. He wore a long cashmere coat, a silk scarf, and a suit that cost more than my first house. His face was clean-shaven, his hair slicked back, and his eyes were dead things, flat and black like a shark's. Behind him were 2 men who looked like they were carved out of granite. Their knuckles scarred, their expressions bored. Dante scrambled up from the floor, trying to hide behind the sofa. "Vinny, please," he stammered. "I have the money. It is coming. The transfer is pending. It is just a bank delay." Vinny didn't look at Dante. He looked around the room, taking in the crystal chandelier, the paintings, the expensive furniture. He looked like a man appraising a storage unit he had just bought at auction. Then his eyes landed on me. I didn't stand up. I didn't flinch. I took a sip of my tea. Beast let out a low, rumbling growl, but I rested my hand on his head and he went silent, though his muscles remained coiled tight. "Who is this?" Vinny asked, his voice smooth and quiet like oil pouring over gravel. "That is my dad," Dante shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "That is Otis. He has the money, Vinny. He is the one with the trust fund. He is going to sign the check. Tell him, Dad. Tell him we are good for it." Vinny walked toward me. His shoes made no sound on the rug. He stopped 3 feet away, looming over my chair. He smelled of expensive tobacco and violence. "You are the steel man," Vinny said. "I checked the records. You worked the mills." "I did," I replied, my voice steady. 40 years. Respect," Vinny said, nodding slightly. "My old man worked the docks. Hard life. Honest money." He turned his head slowly to look at Dante, who was sweating through his suit. "Unlike this clown. He tells me you are good for 400 grand, Mr. Freeman." "Is that true? Are you covering his bet?" Dante looked at me, his eyes bulging. "Please, Dad, just tell him. Just say yes. We can go to the bank right now." I looked at my son. I saw the fear, yes, but I also saw the entitlement. He still thought I was his safety net. He still thought he could gamble with his life, and I would pick up the tab. I took another sip of tea. "I don't owe you a dime, Mr. Moretti," I said calmly. "I didn't borrow money from you. I didn't buy a Lamborghini I couldn't afford, and I didn't promise to pay you back double in a week." Vinny smiled. It was a terrifying expression. "I didn't think so." He snapped his fingers. The 2 granite men moved. They moved fast. One of them grabbed Dante by the collar of his jacket and hauled him out from behind the sofa like he was a rag doll. Dante kicked and screamed, flailing his arms, but the man didn't even blink. He threw Dante onto the coffee table, pinning him down with one hand. Jessica screamed and tried to run for the stairs, but the second man blocked her path. He didn't touch her. He just stood there, a wall of meat and intimidation. She collapsed against the banister, sobbing. Vinny walked over to Dante. He pulled a cigar cutter from his pocket. It was gold sharp and very efficient. "You know the rules, kid," Vinny said, grabbing Dante's left hand. "You play the big shot, you pay the big shot prices. You are late. Late costs." He forced Dante's pinky finger into the cutter. Dante howled. It was a primal sound, a sound of absolute terror. "Dad, Dad, help me. He is going to cut it off. Dad, do something." I watched. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my face was stone. Every instinct as a father screamed at me to jump up, to fight, to throw myself in front of the blade. But I knew that if I saved him now, if I bailed him out one more time, I would be killing him just as surely as Vinny would. If he didn't feel the consequences of his greed today, he would do something worse tomorrow. Vinny looked at me. He was testing me. He wanted to see if I would crack. He wanted to see if the checkbook would open. "He is your son." "Old man," Vinny said, the cigar cutter resting against Dante's skin. "You going to let me clip him?" I set my teacup down on the saucer. It made a gentle clinking sound in the room filled with screams. "This is my house, Mr. Moretti," I said. "I built these floors. I paid for this roof. I don't want blood on my carpet." Dante stopped screaming for a second, staring at me in disbelief. "Dad, if you have business with him," I continued, looking Vinny in the eye, "you take it outside. You want to collect a debt? You collect it. But you don't do it in my living room. Drag him out to the yard." Vinny stared at me for a long moment. He was looking for a bluff. He was looking for weakness. He found neither. He saw a man who had drawn a line in the sand and was willing to watch the tide come in. He laughed. A short, dark sound. "Cold," Vinny said. "Ice cold. I like it." He pulled the cigar cutter away from Dante's finger. He signaled to his men. "Take him outside," Vinny ordered. "Teach him how to tell time." The man holding Dante yanked him up. He dragged him toward the broken front door. Dante grabbed at the furniture, grabbing at the doorframe, screaming my name. "Dad, please, Dad, don't let them take me. I will change. I promise." I didn't look away. I watched him go. They dragged him out into the snow. Through the open door, I could see them throw him onto the driveway right next to the red-splattered Lamborghini. I didn't go to the window. I didn't need to see it. I could hear it. I heard the dull thud of fists hitting flesh. I heard the crunch of a boot connecting with ribs. I heard my son crying, begging, promising money he didn't have. Jessica was on the floor in the hallway, her hands over her ears, rocking back and forth. Vinny stayed in the living room with me for a moment. He lit a cigar, blowing the smoke toward the ceiling. "You are a hard man, Mr. Freeman," he said. "I am a father," I replied. "Sometimes that is the same thing." He nodded. He walked to the door. "Tell him he has got another week," Vinny said. "But the price just went up. Next time we don't use fists. Next time I use the cutter. And I won't do it outside." He walked out, stepping over the debris of the doorframe. I sat there listening to the engine of the van start up and drive away. Silence returned to the house, broken only by the low sobbing of Jessica and the groans coming from the driveway. I finished my tea. It was cold. I stood up and walked to the door. Dante was lying in the snow, curled into a fetal ball. His face was a mess of blood and bruising. His expensive suit was torn and muddy. He was shivering, broken, and alone. I walked down the steps. Beast followed me, sniffing the air. I stood over my son. He looked up at me through one swollen eye. Why, he whispered, blood bubbling on his lips. "Why didn't you stop them? You have the money. You could have stopped them." I looked down at him. "I did stop them, Dante," I said. "I told them to take it outside. If I hadn't, they would have cut your finger off right there on the rug. You still have 10 fingers. You can still work." I reached down not to help him up, but to check his pockets. I pulled out the keys to the Lamborghini. "You won't be needing this," I said. "Vinny is going to take it as a down payment. I will call the tow truck." "You are a monster," Dante wept. "No, son," I said, turning back toward the warm house. "I am the only person in the world telling you the truth. You spent money that wasn't yours. You bought a life you didn't earn. This is the receipt." I walked back inside. Jessica was looking at me with horror as if I were the devil himself. "Get the first aid kit," I told her, "and clean him up." And Jessica, she flinched. "If I ever see Vinny in my house again," I said, "I won't tell him to take it outside. I will tell him to finish the job." I went upstairs to my room. My hands were shaking now that no one could see. I felt sick. I felt old. Seeing my son beaten was the hardest thing I had ever done. But I knew that if I had paid Vinny off, Dante would have learned nothing. He would have thought he was invincible. He would have thought Daddy would always be there to fix it. Now he knew. There was no safety net. There was only the hard, cold ground. I sat on the edge of my bed and looked at Betty's picture. "I hope you are right, old girl," I whispered, "because if this doesn't break him, nothing will." Downstairs, I heard the front door close as Jessica finally dragged him in. The house was safe again. But the lesson was far from over. Dante was broken, but he wasn't fixed. Not yet. He still thought the money was the answer. He still thought he could outsmart the consequences. He didn't know that the next betrayal wouldn't come from Vinny. It would come from the woman wiping the blood off his face. Jessica had seen me sitting in that chair. She had seen the power. And unlike Dante, she wasn't scared. She was calculating. The wolves were inside the house now, and the pack was about to turn on itself. The silence in the house after Vinny left was heavier than the iron beams I used to haul. It was a silence broken only by the wet, raspy breathing of my son Dante, who was lying on the sofa nursing his broken ribs and his shattered ego. His face was a map of purple and blue bruises, and his hand, the one Vinny had threatened to clip, was shaking uncontrollably as he held an ice pack to his jaw. He looked like a child who had been mauled by a dog he tried to pet. But it wasn't Dante I was watching. It was Jessica. Most wives, seeing their husband beaten and broken, would be hovering over them. They would be fetching water, fluffing pillows, whispering words of comfort. But Jessica was not most wives. She stood by the window looking out at the empty driveway where the Lamborghini used to be. Her back was to Dante. Her posture was rigid. She wasn't looking at him with pity. She was vibrating with a cold, hard rage. I sat in my chair stroking Beast's fur, and I saw the calculation happening in her eyes. She was doing math. She was subtracting Dante from the equation. She had realized something crucial in the last hour. Dante was not the golden ticket. He was the anchor dragging her down to the bottom of the ocean. He was weak, he was in debt, and he had no control over me. She turned around and walked past the sofa. She didn't look at Dante. She didn't ask if he needed pain medication. She walked straight to the stairs, her heels clicking on the hardwood like a countdown. "Where are you going?" Dante mumbled through his swollen lips. "I need a shower," Jessica said without stopping. "I smell like failure." She went upstairs. I heard the door to the master bedroom lock. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Mr. Sterling. "She just called me. She wants to meet. Alone." I looked at the phone, then up at the ceiling. Of course she did. The rat was looking for a new ship. "Take the meeting," I texted back. "Wear the wire. I want to hear everything." An hour later, Jessica came downstairs. She had transformed. The terrified weeping woman from the morning was gone. In her place was a predator dressed for the kill. She was wearing a black dress that fit her like a second skin, cut low in the front and high in the leg. She had put on fresh makeup covering the stress lines around her eyes. She wore the diamond earrings I knew she had hidden from the pawn shop. She looked expensive. She looked dangerous. Dante looked up from his misery, his one good eye widening. "Jess," he croaked, "you look—" "Where are you going?" "I have to go handle some business, Dante," she said, pulling on her coat. "Since you are incapable of fixing this mess, someone has to." "What business?" Dante asked, trying to sit up and groaning in pain. Vinny took the car. "We have no money. Go back to sleep, Dante," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "Let the adults talk." She walked out the door into the cold night air. She didn't look back. She called an Uber because her car was gone too sold last week to pay the interest on a credit card. I waited until the taillights faded. "Rest, son," I said to Dante. "I am going to my room." I went upstairs, but I didn't rest. I put in my earpiece and opened the laptop connecting to the secure feed from Mr. Sterling's office. He had agreed to meet her at a private booth in a high-end steakhouse downtown, a place dark enough for secrets and loud enough to cover a betrayal. I listened as the audio feed crackled to life. I could hear the clinking of silverware and the hum of conversation. Mr. Sterling Jessica's voice came through clear and smooth like velvet wrapped around a knife. "Thank you for meeting me on such short notice." Mrs. Freeman Sterling replied, his voice professional, guarded. "I admit I was surprised by your call. I thought you and your husband were indisposed." "My husband is indisposed," Jessica said. The words sounded like she was spitting out a seed. Dante is not built for this kind of pressure, Mr. Sterling. He is fragile. He breaks easily." I heard the sound of liquid being poured. She must have ordered a drink. "I, on the other hand," she continued, "am very practical. I see the world as it is not how I want it to be. And right now I see a $55 million trust fund that is locked up because of a technicality." "It is not a technicality," Mrs. Freeman Sterling said. "It is a character clause, a legal requirement." Jessica laughed, a soft, throaty sound that was meant to be charming but sounded serpentine to my ears. "Character," she purred. "That is such a quaint idea. But let us be honest, Archibald. Can I call you Archibald? You can call me Mr. Sterling." "Fine. Mr. Sterling, let us look at the facts. Otis is 76 years old. He is stubborn, he is old-fashioned, and frankly, he is not going to last much longer. Dante is weak, he is a gambler, he is a liability. If the money goes to Dante, Vinny the shark will have it all by the end of the month, or Dante will end up dead in a ditch." I gripped the edge of my desk. She was talking about her husband, my son, as if he were a bad stock investment she needed to dump. "So, what are you proposing?" Mrs. Freeman Sterling asked. I heard the rustle of fabric. She was leaning in. I could imagine her placing her hand on his arm, using every ounce of her manipulation. "I am proposing a partnership," she said. "You are the executor. You control the paperwork. You know the loopholes. There must be a way to bypass the 30-day requirement. There must be a way to declare Otis incompetent without a doctor. Or, better yet, a way to restructure the trust. Restructure it how Sterling asked. Cut Dante out, she said. Her voice was cold, absolute. Transfer the beneficiary rights directly to me. I am the one who takes care of the household. I am the one who manages the finances. If the money comes to me, I can protect it. I can manage it. And of course, I would need a legal partner. Someone to help me navigate the complexities. Someone who would be very handsomely rewarded for their creativity. She was bribing him. She was trying to seduce my lawyer into helping her steal my fortune and leave her husband with nothing but broken ribs and debt. And what about Otis? Sterling asked. What happens to him in this scenario? Jessica sighed. Otis. Look, he is an old man. He doesn't need $55 million. He needs a bed and a television. Once the money is mine, I will put him in a nice facility. Somewhere far away. Somewhere he won't be a bother. He will be fine. He won't even know the difference. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. Not for me, for Dante. He had married a monster. He had brought a viper into his bed, and he didn't even know he had been bitten. And Dante Sterling pressed. You would leave your husband with nothing. I would leave him with his life, she said. If I get the money, I will pay off Vinny. I will save his skin. That is more than he deserves. But I am not going to stay married to a loser, Mr. Sterling. I deserve better. I deserve the life Betty Freeman had. I deserve to be a queen. There was a pause. I held my breath. That is a very bold proposal, Mrs. Freeman, Sterling said finally. It is a smart proposal, she corrected. Think about it, Archibald. 10%. $5.5 million. Just for changing a few names on a document. Just for losing a few files. Who would know? Otis is senile. Dante is an idiot. It would just be you and me. I heard the sound of her hand sliding across the table. We could be a very powerful team, she whispered. I felt sick. Physically sick. The greed was so naked, so raw. She didn't care about anyone but herself. I have to go, Sterling said abruptly, the sound of a chair scraping back. I cannot entertain this conversation, Mrs. Freeman. It is unethical and it is illegal. Don't be a Boy Scout, Jessica snapped, her voice losing its seduction, turning sharp. Think about it. I know you are not as clean as you pretend to be. Everyone has a price. Call me when you realize what that price is. The audio feed cut out. Sterling had left the table. I sat in the dark of my room listening to the silence. My heart was heavy. She was going to come back here. She was going to walk through that door and lie next to the man she had just tried to destroy. She was going to smile at me and pretend she was trying to win my favor while secretly plotting to lock me away. I heard the front door open an hour later. I heard her heels on the stairs. I opened my door just as she reached the landing. She stopped. She looked surprised to see me. She composed herself quickly, smoothing her dress, fixing her hair. Otis, she said, smiling that fake plastic smile. You are up late. I couldn't sleep, I said. I was worried about Dante. How is he? She rolled her eyes. He is fine. He is sleeping. He is just dramatic. Where did you go, Jessica? I asked. She didn't even blink. I went to the pharmacy to get him pain medication, and I stopped at the 24-hour grocery to get you some special tea for your nerves. She held up her empty hands. Then she realized she was holding nothing. Oh, she said, tapping her head. I left the bag in the Uber. I am so scattered. The stress, you know. You went to the pharmacy in that dress, I asked, looking at her outfit. It was the only clean thing I had. She lied smoothly. Everything else is dirty, because of the laundry situation. She walked past me smelling of steak and expensive wine. Good night, Otis, she said. Don't stay up too late. Old men need their rest. She went into the bedroom. I heard her talking to Dante. Did you get the medicine? Dante asked, his voice muffled. Shh, she soothed him. The store was closed, baby. Go back to sleep. I will take care of everything. I am handling it. Handling it. By selling him down the river. I went back into my room and looked at the laptop. Mr. Sterling had sent the audio file. I saved it. I backed it up to 3 different servers. This was the nail in the coffin. Dante thought his enemy was me. He thought his enemy was Vinny. He didn't know the real enemy was sleeping next to him, sharing his pillow, dreaming of spending his inheritance with another man. I looked at Beast sleeping at the foot of my bed. Even a dog knows loyalty, I whispered. Tomorrow I was going to twist the knife. Jessica thought she was smart. She thought she could outmaneuver everyone, but she had made a mistake. She had shown her hand to the one man she couldn't bribe. And now I had the weapon I needed to shatter their alliance. But I wasn't going to use it yet. Not yet. I needed Dante to be desperate enough to listen. I needed him to be so broken that when I showed him who his wife really was, he wouldn't have the strength to deny it. I needed one more crisis, one more push toward the edge, and I knew exactly how to create it. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. It was time to play the sick old man card. It was time for a medical emergency. A fake one. One that would cost exactly $100,000. Let's see how much they really love Daddy when his life has a price tag attached. The kitchen floor was cold against my cheek, but I did not move. I lay there amidst the shattered porcelain of my coffee mug, letting my body go limp and my breathing turn shallow. I had rehearsed this moment in my head a dozen times. It had to be perfect. It had to be terrifying. Dante was the first to find me. He walked in yawning, scratching his bruised ribs, and when he saw me lying prone near the refrigerator, he let out a sound that was half scream, half whimper. "Dad, oh God, Dad, get up." He dropped to his knees beside me, shaking my shoulder. I let my head roll back, my eyes fluttering open just enough to show the whites. I gasped for air, clutching my chest with a trembling hand. "My heart, son." I wheezed. "It feels like a vice." Jessica ran in a moment later. She was already dressed in her expensive coat, probably planning another secret meeting with my lawyer. When she saw me on the floor, she didn't look concerned. She looked annoyed. She looked like someone whose inconvenient problem had just become a medical emergency. "Call 911. Dante shouted, fumbling for his phone with his good hand. "No," I rasped, gripping his wrist. "No ambulance. They will take me to the county hospital. I need Dr. Evans." Dr. Evans was not a doctor. He was my old friend Silas, a retired Army medic who used to patch up guys at the mill when we couldn't afford to lose a shift by going to the ER. Silas looked the part, though. He had a stethoscope and a grave demeanor that could freeze water. Dante called the number I whispered to him. 20 minutes later, Silas walked through the door carrying a black medical bag. He didn't look at the luxury of the house. He went straight to work. He listened to my chest. He took my blood pressure. He shone a light in my eyes. He stood up and took off his stethoscope, sighing heavily. "It is bad," he said, his voice deep and serious. "It is an aortic aneurysm. It is ready to blow. He needs surgery immediately, a bypass, or he will be dead by midnight." "Dead?" Dante whispered, his face draining of color. Silas nodded. "Dead. And I cannot do it here. I need to get him to a specialist, a private surgeon who can operate off the books today. But it is not cheap." "How much?" Jessica asked, her eyes narrowing. $100,000, Silas said. "Cash. Up front. The surgeon doesn't take insurance, and even if he did, your accounts are frozen." Dante looked at Jessica. "We don't have that kind of money. We don't have any money. Vinny took everything." "Then he dies," Silas said simply. He started packing his bag. "I will give him something for the pain, but that is all I can do. Make him comfortable. Say your goodbyes." I let out a low groan from the floor, clutching my chest again. "Dante," I whispered. "The will." "What about the will?" Dad Dante asked, leaning close. "Clause 9. I gasped. The fail-safe. If I die, before the 30 days are up, the trust." I stopped pretending to lose my breath. "What about the trust?" Jessica snapped, stepping over my legs to get in my face. "What happens to the trust?" "Automatic freeze," I whispered. 10 years. Investigation. Audit. If I die, suspicious, or premature, nobody gets a dime until 2035. The lie hung in the air like smoke. It was beautiful. It was devastating. 10 years, Jessica shrieked. She looked at Dante. 10 years, Dante. We will be dead by then. Vinny will kill us next week if we don't pay him. We need that money now. Dante looked from me to Jessica to Silas. He was doing the math. If I died today, he lost $55 million for a decade. If I lived, he got it in 3 weeks. "We have to pay," he said. "We have to save him." With what Jessica yelled, "We have nothing. You gave Vinny the cash. They took the car. What is left?" Dante looked at her. He looked at her ears. He looked at her wrists. He looked at her fingers. "The jewelry," he said, "the engagement ring, the diamond earrings, the Rolex I bought you for Christmas, and my watch collection, the designer bags, the artwork." "No," Jessica said, covering her ears with her hands. "No, Dante, that is mine. That is my insurance. It is that or 10 years of poverty," Dante shouted, grabbing her arm. "Do you want to be poor, Jessica? Do you want to work at a diner? Do you want to run from sharks for the rest of your life? Give me the jewelry." I watched from the floor as their alliance crumbled. It was a beautiful thing to see. The greed that bound them together was now tearing them apart. Jessica started crying. Real tears this time, tears of loss. She took off the earrings. She pulled the ring from her finger. It was a 3-carat diamond purchased with money I had lent Dante for a business startup that never started. She threw them on the floor next to me. "Take it," she screamed. "Take it all." Dante ran upstairs. I heard him tearing through the bedroom. He came back down with a pillowcase. He was stuffing things into it. His watches, her Chanel bags, a small sculpture they had bought in Paris. He stripped the house of everything that had value, everything they used to define themselves. He poured it all onto the living room rug. It was a pile of glittering vanity. Gold, leather, diamonds. "Is this enough?" Dante asked Silas, desperate. Silas looked at the pile. He picked up a watch. He looked at the ring. "It is a start," he said. "But you need cash. The surgeon doesn't take trinkets. You have 2 hours. Get to a pawn shop. Get the cash. Or your father dies and your money goes into the freezer." Dante scrambled to gather everything back into the pillowcase. He looked at me. "Hang on, Dad," he said. "Just hang on. I am going to save you." He wasn't saving me. He was saving his future. He ran out the door, dragging the heavy bag of loot. Jessica collapsed onto the sofa, sobbing into her hands. I lay there on the floor and closed my eyes. For the next 2 hours, the house was silent except for Jessica's sniffling. Silas sat in the chair reading a magazine, keeping up the charade. I thought about the jewelry Dante was selling. I thought about how much pride he had when he bought those things, how he flashed that watch at every family dinner, how Jessica made sure her ring caught the light in every photo. They were selling their identity. They were stripping themselves bare to keep a lie alive. Dante came back 2 hours later. He was sweating profusely. He looked like he had run a marathon. He was clutching a thick brown envelope. "I got it," he gasped, dropping to his knees beside me. "It wasn't easy. They lowballed me, Dad. They knew I was desperate. I only got 80,000. That is all they would give me. The ring alone was worth 50. He looked at Silas. "Is 80 enough? Please tell me it is enough." Silas looked at me. I gave a microscopic nod. "I can make it work," Silas said, taking the envelope. "I will call in a favor, but you owe me." Dante nodded vigorously. "Anything. Just save him." Silas helped me up. I leaned heavily on him, groaning with every step. "I am taking him now," Silas said. "Don't follow us. The clinic is private. I will bring him back when he is stable." Dante watched us go. He looked lighter. He thought he had won. He thought he had secured his fortune. He had just sold everything he owned to pay a man who wasn't a doctor for a surgery I didn't need to save an inheritance he would never get. We walked out to Silas's beat-up sedan. As soon as the car doors closed, I sat up straight. The wheezing stopped. The pain vanished. "You are a wicked man," Otis Silas said, laughing as he started the engine. "I learned from the best," I said, looking back at the house. We drove to the bank. Not the one Dante used. My bank. I deposited the $80,000 into the Betty Freeman Foundation account. Every penny Dante had just scraped together, every symbol of his vanity, was now going to help people who actually needed it. People who knew the value of $1 because they had never had one. It was the most expensive donation Dante had ever made, and he didn't even know it. I spent the night at Silas's house eating stew and watching television. I needed to give it time. I needed Dante and Jessica to stew in their empty house surrounded by the ghosts of the things they used to own. When I returned the next morning, I walked in with a bandage on my chest, a fake scar painted over my heart. I looked weak but alive. Dante was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the empty spot on his wrist where his watch used to be. Jessica was staring at her bare ring finger, rubbing the skin where the diamond had sat. "I am alive, son," I whispered, walking into the room. Dante looked up. Relief washed over his face. Not love, relief. The money was safe. Thank God, he said. You had us worried, Dad. I sat down slowly. I know I said. It was a close call. But the doctor said I am good for another 20 years. Jessica flinched. 20 years. She looked like she was going to be sick. I know you made sacrifices, I said, looking at their bare hands. I see the jewelry is gone. We did what we had to do, Dante said, trying to sound noble. Family comes first. I nodded. Yes, family comes first. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a small velvet pouch. I wanted to thank you, I said. Dante's eyes lit up. He thought I had bought the jewelry back. He thought I had used my secret stash to replace what they sold. I opened the pouch. Inside was a single cheap plastic key. What is this? Dante asked, confused. It is the key to the shed, I said. I noticed the lawnmower needs oil. Since you don't have a watch anymore, you have plenty of time to fix it. The look on his face was worth more than $55 million. It was the look of a man who realized he had just bought a ticket to a show that had already ended. But the show wasn't over. Not yet. I had one more card to play. The ace of spades. I had the recording of Jessica and the lawyer. I had the evidence of her betrayal. Dante had sacrificed his vanity for me. Now I was going to show him that the woman he sacrificed it for was sharpening a knife for his back. It was time to divide and conquer. The money was gone. The jewelry was gone. Now it was time for the marriage to go. The adhesive tape on my chest pulled at my skin as I ripped the bandage off. It made a dry, tearing sound that seemed too loud in the quiet living room. Underneath the gauze, my skin was unbroken. There was no incision. There was no scar. There was just the gray hair of an old man and a heart that was beating steady and strong despite the poison that filled my house. Dante was sitting on the edge of the sofa, staring at the floor. He looked like a hollow shell of the man he used to be. He had sold his watches. He had sold his dignity. He had handed over $80,000 to a man he thought was a surgeon just to keep his inheritance alive. And now he was sitting there waiting for me to die or recover, not knowing which one would benefit him more. I stood up from the armchair. I stretched my arms above my head, cracking my back. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. I feel good, I said, my voice booming in the silence. I feel like a new man. Dante looked up. His eyes were bloodshot and confused. He looked at my bare chest. He looked at the crumpled bandage on the floor. Dad, he stammered. The incision, the surgery. It has only been 24 hours. You should be in bed. You should be weak. Miracles happen, son, I said, walking toward the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of water. My hand was steady. The tremor I had faked for weeks was gone. Maybe it was the money you spent. It must have been magic money. It healed me right up. Jessica was standing by the window. She turned around slowly. Her eyes narrowed. She was smarter than Dante. She saw the energy in my step. She saw the clarity in my eyes. She realized something was wrong. You are not sick, she whispered. You were never sick. I took a long drink of water. I slammed the glass down on the counter. I am sick, Jessica, I said. I am sick of the lies. I am sick of the greed. I am sick of watching you two circle me like vultures waiting for the carcass to cool. Dante stood up. His face went red. We sold everything, Dad. I sold my Rolex. I sold the things I loved. To save you. You sold them to save yourself, I corrected him. You sold them because you thought if I died, the trust fund would lock down for 10 years. You didn't pay for a heart surgery, Dante. You paid for a lesson. What lesson? Dante screamed, taking a step toward me. That you are a liar, that you tricked us. The lesson is about value, I said calmly, and about loyalty. You sold your toys, Dante. But do you know what your wife was doing while you were running around town pawn shops? I looked at Jessica. She froze. Her face went pale beneath her makeup. She knew. Deep down she knew that I knew. Don't listen to him, Dante, she said, her voice shrill. He is trying to divide us. He is senile. He is cruel. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a USB drive. It was small, silver, and cold. It contained the death of a marriage. I walked over to the large flat-screen TV on the wall, the one Dante had bought with credit cards he couldn't pay off. I plugged the drive into the side. Sit down, Dante, I commanded. I am not watching your home movies, Dad. Dante spat. "Sit down," I roared. My voice was the voice of the steel mill foreman. It was the voice of a man who commanded respect when sparks were flying and metal was melting. Dante sat. He collapsed onto the sofa as if his legs had been cut out from under him. I pressed play. The screen flickered to life. It wasn't a high-definition movie. It was grainy footage from a security camera inside a dimly lit steakhouse, but the audio was crystal clear. There was Jessica sitting in a booth. She was leaning forward, her hand resting on the arm of a man in a suit. "My lawyer, Mr. Sterling." Dante leaned forward, squinting at the screen. Is that Sterling?" "Shh," I said. "Listen." Jessica's voice filled the living room. It was smooth, seductive, and dripping with venom. "Dante is weak," she said on the screen. "He is a gambler. He is a liability. If the money goes to him, Vinny the Shark will have it all by the end of the month." Dante flinched as if he had been slapped. He looked at the real Jessica standing by the window. She was shaking her head, mouthing the word "no" over and over again. The video continued. "I am proposing a partnership," Jessica said on the screen. "Cut Dante out. Transfer the beneficiary rights directly to me. I can protect the money." Dante turned to look at her. His expression was one of pure heartbreak. It was the look of a man realizing that the only person he thought was on his side was actually holding the knife. Jessica on the screen laughed. It was a cold sound. "I am not going to stay married to a loser, Mr. Sterling. I deserve better. I deserve to be a queen. Once I have the money, I will dump the old man in a facility and Dante can deal with his own debts." I paused the video. The image of Jessica's smiling face froze on the screen, looming over us like a gargoyle. Dante stood up slowly. He was trembling. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides. "You tried to cut me out," he whispered. Jessica backed away until she hit the wall. "Dante, it is not what it looks like." He manipulated the video. "It is a deep fake. You know technology these days." "Stop lying!" Dante screamed. His voice broke. He sounded like a wounded animal. "I sold my watch for you. I sold everything. I humiliated myself washing clothes in the basement. I let Vinny beat me. I did it all for us." "There is no us," Jessica screamed back, dropping the act. Her face twisted into a mask of ugly rage. "There is only me, Dante, because you are a sinkhole. You are a failure. Look at you. You are 35 years old and you are begging your daddy for an allowance. You are pathetic." Dante lunged. He didn't hit her. He grabbed a vase from the side table. A crystal vase that had been a wedding gift. He threw it against the wall inches from her head. It shattered into 1,000 diamond shards, showering her with glass and water. "You are a parasite," he yelled. "You drained me. You made me buy that car. You made me get the house. You spent every dime I ever made, and now you want to steal my inheritance." "I stole nothing," Jessica shrieked, picking up a heavy bookend and hurling it at him. It hit him in the shoulder, but he didn't even flinch. "Because you don't have an inheritance, you idiot. Your father is never going to give it to you. He hates you. Can't you see that? He is playing with us." She ran at him, clawing at his face. Dante grabbed her wrists. They wrestled in the center of the living room, knocking over the coffee table. The expensive lamp crashed to the floor. The rug bunched up under their feet. It was ugly. It was violent. It was the physical manifestation of their spiritual rot. I stood by the TV watching. I didn't intervene. I didn't call the police. This was necessary. They needed to break everything. They needed to destroy the facade they had built. "Get off me," Jessica screamed, kicking him in the shin. Dante shoved her back. She fell onto the sofa. She scrambled up, her hair wild, her dress torn at the shoulder. "I am leaving," she panted. "I am leaving you. I am going to the police. I am going to tell them you assaulted me." "Go!" Dante roared. "Get out! Take your fake shoes and your fake love and get out of my house. Your house." Jessica laughed hysterically. "It is not your house, Dante. It is his house. You are just a squatter. You are a homeless man in a tuxedo." She grabbed her purse from the chair. She marched to the door. "I hope Vinny finds you," she spat. "I hope he breaks every bone in your body. And when you are lying in the hospital, don't call me, because I will be gone." She slammed the door so hard the glass pane cracked. Silence rushed back into the room, but it was a heavy, suffocating silence. The living room was destroyed. Glass everywhere. Furniture overturned, the smell of spilled water and old anger. Dante stood in the middle of the wreckage chest, heaving. He looked at his hands. He looked at the door. Then he looked at me. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked shattered. He looked like a building that had been imploded from the inside. He dropped to his knees. He didn't care about the glass shards on the floor. He just collapsed. She was going to steal it, he whispered. She was going to take it all. I walked over to him. I stood over him just like I had in the snow a week ago, but this time I didn't feel pity. I felt a grim satisfaction. The tumor had been cut out. The surgery was messy, but the patient might survive. She didn't love you, son, I said quietly. She loved the reflection of herself in your money. And when the money ran out, the reflection disappeared. Dante looked up at me, tears streaming down his bruised face. Dad, I messed up. I messed up everything. I looked at the calendar on the wall. You have 14 days left, Dante, I said. 14 days on the clock. What clock, he asked, dazed. The clock on your redemption, I said. Jessica is gone. The jewelry is gone. The fake friends are gone. It is just you and me and the truth. I reached out a hand. Stand up, son. We have a house to clean. He looked at my hand. He hesitated. Then he reached out and took it. His grip was weak, but it was there. I pulled him to his feet. He looked around the destroyed room. What do we do now? He asked. Now, I said, handing him a broom. Now we start over. From the bottom. I walked to the kitchen to make coffee. I left him standing there in the ruins of his life. He had hit rock bottom. Finally. But he wasn't safe yet. Jessica was out there. And she was angry. A woman like that doesn't just walk away. She burns the bridge and then she comes back to poison the water. And Mr. Sterling had told me something else about Jessica. Something I hadn't told Dante yet. She hadn't just tried to bribe the lawyer. She had forged checks. Real checks. From the company account she managed for Dante. The police were building a file. And when they came knocking, they wouldn't just be looking for her. They would be looking for her accomplice. Dante thought the fight was over. He didn't know he was about to become a suspect in a federal investigation. I sipped my coffee. The bitterness tasted like justice. Clean it up, Dante, I called out from the kitchen. Every shard. Because if he wanted to survive what was coming next, he needed to learn how to sweep up his own mess. The 30th day dawned with a sky the color of old slate gray and unforgiving. The house was silent, but it was the silence of a bomb squad waiting for the timer to hit 0. I sat in my armchair wearing my best Sunday suit, the one Betty had bought me for our 40th anniversary. It was a little loose now. The stress of the last month had carved a few pounds off my frame, but I felt stronger than I had in years. I felt like iron that had been tempered in the fire. Dante and Jessica were sitting on the ruined sofa. They looked like shipwreck survivors who had washed up on a hostile shore. Jessica had come back the night before, sneaking in through the back door like a stray cat. She had nowhere else to go. Her friends had abandoned her when the money dried up and her credit cards were useless. She was wearing dark sunglasses to hide the bruising around her eyes from their fight, but she couldn't hide the hunger in her posture. Dante sat on the other end of the couch, as far away from her as possible. His arm was in a sling from where he had slammed it against the wall. His lip was still swollen. He kept checking his phone, checking the time, counting the seconds. It was 9:55 in the morning. Mr. Sterling was due at 10. Dante looked at me. He tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. We made it. Dad, he said, his voice raspy. Day 30. We did it. We are a family again. I didn't smile back. I just looked at him. You survived, son, I said. There is a difference. Jessica adjusted her sunglasses. We took care of you, Otis, she said, her voice thin and sharp. We fed you. We gave you a bed. We did everything the will required. We did our duty. Duty. That was the word she used. Not love, not kindness. Duty. Like cleaning a toilet or taking out the trash. The doorbell rang at exactly 10 o'clock. Mr. Sterling was never late. Dante jumped up so fast he stumbled. He rushed to the door, pulling it open with his good hand. Mr. Sterling, he breathed, almost bowing. Please come in. We have been expecting you. Sterling walked in carrying a black leather briefcase that looked heavy enough to contain the weight of the world. He was wearing a charcoal suit and a tie the color of blood. He didn't smile. He didn't shake Dante's hand. He walked past him and nodded to me. Good morning, Otis, Sterling said. Good morning, Archibald, I replied. Sterling placed the briefcase on the coffee table, pushing aside a stack of unpaid bills. He looked at Dante, then at Jessica. He looked at the broken lamp in the corner that they hadn't bothered to clean up. He looked at the stains on the rug. He sat down in the wingback chair opposite me. Dante and Jessica sat back down on the sofa, leaning forward like hungry dogs waiting for a bone. So Dante said, rubbing his hands together nervously, "It has been 30 days. Mom died a month ago today. We have fulfilled the requirements. Dad has been living here. We have provided food, shelter, everything." Sterling clicked the latches of the briefcase. The sound was loud in the quiet room. Click. Click. He opened the lid. He pulled out a single document bound in blue paper. He put on his reading glasses, slowly, deliberately letting them sweat. "Mr. Freeman," Mrs. Freeman Sterling began, his voice dry and professional. "You are correct. The 30-day probationary period outlined in the living trust of Betty Freeman has concluded." Dante let out a breath he must have been holding for a week. Jessica gripped her knees so hard her knuckles turned white. "So we get access?" Dante asked. "The account's unlocked today, right?" "The creditors. They are waiting." Sterling held up a hand. "Let us review the terms," Sterling said. "Clause 7, subsection B." He began to read. "The assets of the Freeman estate totaling $55 million and including all real estate holdings shall be transferred to the primary beneficiary, Dante Freeman, upon the completion of a 30-day care period for the surviving spouse, Otis Freeman." "Yes," Dante interrupted. "We did that. He is right there. He is alive. He is fed. We washed his clothes. We cooked his food. Jessica cooked beans. We did it." Sterling looked over his glasses. He wasn't done reading. However, he continued, his voice dropping an octave, becoming heavier. "The clause contains a stipulation regarding the nature of said care." He turned the page. "The care provided must be unequivocal. It must be continuous. And most importantly, it must be born of sincerity and lacking in ulterior motive." The room went dead silent. You could hear the wind scratching against the window pane. Dante blinked. "What?" Sterling read it again, slower this time, enunciating every syllable. "Born of sincerity and lacking an ulterior motive. That means, Mr. Freeman, that the care you provided could not be a transaction. It could not be a means to an end. It had to be the act of a loving son caring for his grieving father." Jessica stood up. "That is subjective," she snapped. "That is legal mumbo-jumbo. Who is to say it wasn't sincere? We are here, aren't we? We suffered through this month." "Suffered," I said quietly. They both looked at me. "You suffered," I repeated. "Is that what you call living with your father?" "Suffering." Jessica realized her mistake, but she doubled down. "It was hard, Otis. You made it hard. You made us wash clothes by hand. You made us eat garbage. But we did it. We earned that money." Sterling closed the folder. "Earned," he said. "That is an interesting choice of word. You earn a wage. You earn a salary. You do not earn an inheritance. An inheritance is a gift, and a gift requires gratitude." Dante stood up now, his face flushing red. "This is a trick. This is some kind of trap. You can't prove we weren't sincere. I love my dad. I brought him home from the shelter. You brought me home because Vinny the Shark painted your car red," I said. Dante froze. "You brought me home because you needed a thumbprint to open a bank account," I continued. "That isn't love, Dante. That is kidnapping with better catering." "I don't care about the wording," Jessica shouted, pointing a shaking finger at Sterling. "We fulfilled the contract. We kept him alive. Give us the check." Sterling sighed. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had seen too much of the dark side of human nature. "I cannot do that," he said. "Why not?" Dante screamed. "Because," Sterling said, reaching into his briefcase again, "the clause has a specific enforcement mechanism. If there is any evidence of coercion, abuse, neglect, or fraudulent intent during the 30-day period, the beneficiary is immediately disqualified." "Evidence?" Dante laughed a hysterical, high-pitched sound. "What evidence? It is just our word against his. And he is senile, remember? He is confused." Sterling pulled out a remote control. He pointed it at the large flat-screen TV on the wall, the one Dante had bought with stolen money. He pressed a button. The screen flickered to life. It wasn't a TV show. It was a grid. 9 different camera angles. The living room, the kitchen, the hallway, the study. Dante's mouth fell open. "We installed them the day after the funeral," Sterling said. high definition, audio and video, cloud storage. Otis gave us permission. It is his house after all. On the screen we saw the last 30 days play out in fast forward. We saw Dante screaming at me in the kitchen. We saw Jessica spitting in my tea before serving it to me. We saw them searching my room while I was asleep looking for the safe combination. We saw the fight where they destroyed the living room, where they threw vases and screamed about how much they hated me, how much they wanted me dead. And we saw the meeting where Jessica tried to bribe Sterling, the video I had played for Dante 2 weeks ago. Sterling paused the video on a freeze frame of Dante's face, twisted in rage, his fist raised as if to strike me. This, Sterling said, pointing at the screen, "This is not sincerity, this is not care, this is abuse, this is fraud, this is a conspiracy." Jessica collapsed back onto the sofa. She looked like a marionette whose strings had been cut. Dante stared at the screen. He was shaking his head back and forth, back and forth. "No," he whispered. "No, that is private. You can't use that. It is evidence," Sterling said. "And it is admissible." He stood up. He smoothed his tie. "Dante Freeman, Jessica Freeman. By the power vested in me as the executor of the Betty Freeman estate, and in accordance with the visual and audio evidence gathered over the last 30 days, I am hereby invoking the disqualification protocol." "Disqualification," Dante choked out. "You have failed the test," Sterling said. "You failed it on day 1. You failed it on day 10. You failed it every single day. You treated your father like a hostage, and now the ransom has been canceled." "What does that mean?" Jessica whispered, her voice trembling. "It means," Sterling said, picking up his briefcase, "you get nothing. Not 1 dime. Not the house. Not the cars. Not the 55 million. But the debts," Dante stammered. "Vinny. The bank. The loans. Those are your debts," Sterling said coldly. "They belong to you, just like your choices. Otis, please." Dante turned to me, falling to his knees again, just like he had at the shelter. But this time, it wasn't an act. This time, it was the true terror of a man watching the guillotine blade fall. "Dad, please, you can't let him do this. Stop him. Tell him we tried. Tell him we are family." I looked at my son. I looked at the bruises on his face, the fear in his eyes. I stood up. My knees didn't pop this time. I walked over to him. I looked down. "I am family, Dante," I said. "You are just a man who shares my last name." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the notebook. "Betty's notebook. Your mother knew," I said. "She knew you would do this. She hoped you wouldn't. She prayed you wouldn't, but she knew." I tossed the notebook onto the coffee table. "She wrote you a letter," I said. "It is in the back. Read it when you are in prison. It might help you sleep." "Prison!" Jessica shrieked. "Why prison? We didn't commit a crime. We just wanted what was ours." Sterling paused at the door. "Actually, Mrs. Freeman," he said, "that brings me to the other matter. The forged checks. The identity theft, the attempted bribery of a legal official, and the conspiracy to commit medical fraud with Dr. Thorne." He checked his watch. "The police should be here in about 3 minutes. I suggest you pack a toothbrush, although I doubt they will let you keep it." Dante looked at the door. Then he looked at the window. He was looking for a way out. "Don't run, Dante," I said. "You can't run from this. Vinny is outside. The police are coming. The only safe place for you now is a cell." He slumped forward, his forehead touching the dirty rug. He began to weep, deep guttural sobs of a man who has lost everything. Jessica wasn't crying. She was staring at nothing, her face a mask of shock. She had gambled everything on one hand and she had drawn a joker. I walked over to the window. I saw the flashing lights turning the corner, blue and red reflecting off the snow. It was over. The 30 days were up. The house was quiet again. The only sound was my son crying and the approaching sirens. I felt a heavy sadness in my chest, but beneath it there was relief. It was done. The rot had been cut out. I turned to Mr. Sterling. "Thank you, Archibald," I said. He nodded. "It is done, Otis. It is finally done." The front door opened, not kicked in this time, but pushed open with authority. 2 uniformed officers stepped in. Behind them were 2 detectives in suits, Dante Freeman. "Jessica Freeman," a detective said, pulling out handcuffs. "We have warrants for your arrest." Dante didn't fight. He held out his hands. He looked at me one last time as the metal clicked shut around his wrists. "Dad," he whispered, "help me." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had thrown me into the snow. "I am helping you, son," I said softly. "I am teaching you the only lesson you ever refused to learn." Consequences. They led them away. I watched them go. I watched them get put into the back of the police car. I was alone in the big empty house. Just me and Beast, and $55 million that I didn't want. I looked around at the luxury, the crystal, the velvet. It all looked like dust to me now. I knew what I had to do. This house was poisoned. The money was a burden. I needed to clean the slate. I needed to build something new from the ashes. And I knew exactly where to start. Who says it was not sincere? Dante screamed, his voice cracking like a dry branch under a heavy boot. He jumped up from the sofa, ignoring the pain in his broken ribs. His face twisted into a mask of desperate entitlement. We fed him. We gave him a bed in his own house. We tolerated that beast of a dog. We did everything the paper said. You cannot prove what was in our hearts. You cannot prove we did not care. He looked around the room, his eyes wild, seeking validation from the empty corners. It is just his word against ours, he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. He is a bitter old man. He is lying. We loved him. We took care of him. Care. Where is the proof, Sterling? Show me the proof or give me the check. Mr. Sterling did not answer. He just looked at me. He closed his briefcase with a soft click and sat back in the wingback chair, steepling his fingers. He nodded to me, a small, almost imperceptible movement. It was time. I reached into the pocket of my jacket. My fingers brushed against the cool plastic of the remote control. It was a universal remote one that controlled the entire smart system Dante had installed to show off to his friends. He never knew that I had the master access code. He never knew that the cameras he installed to watch his expensive toys were now watching him. I proof it, I said quietly. Dante froze. He looked at the remote in my hand. What are you doing? He whispered. I pointed the remote at the 60-inch television mounted above the fireplace. The screen was black, a dark mirror reflecting the ruin of the room. You want to talk about sincerity, son? I asked, my voice steady. You want to talk about what was in your heart? Let us take a look. I pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life. It was not the cable news or a football game. It was a grid of 9 different camera feeds, black and white, sharp and clear. The living room, the kitchen, the hallway, the master bedroom. The timestamp in the corner read 14 days ago. Dante took a step back. Jessica let out a small gasp, covering her mouth with her hand. I navigated the menu. I selected a clip labeled Kitchen Camera 3. I pressed play. On the screen, Jessica was standing at the stove. She was stirring a pot of soup, the soup she had served me on the 3rd night. Dante was leaning against the counter, nursing a beer. Watch closely, I said. On the screen, Jessica looked over her shoulder to make sure the coast was clear. Then she reached into her pocket. She pulled out a small blue bottle. I knew that bottle. It was a powerful laxative concentrate, something you use for severe medical issues, not for dinner. She unscrewed the cap. She didn't pour a few drops. She poured half the bottle into the soup. She stirred it in her face, twisted in a cruel smile. This will clear him out, she said on the recording, her voice tinny but clear through the television speakers. Maybe if he spends all night in the bathroom, he will stop asking for seconds. Dante on the screen laughed. It was a mean sound. Just make sure he doesn't die, Jess. We need him breathing for another 3 weeks. I hit pause. The image of Dante laughing froze on the screen. In the living room, the real Dante was silent. His face had gone the color of old ash. He looked at Jessica. You poisoned him, he whispered. We poisoned him, I corrected. You stood right there and watched. You laughed. And that night when I was sick, when my stomach was twisting in knots, you told me it must have been a stomach bug. You told me I was getting frail. I pressed play again. I skipped forward to another clip. This one was in the hallway outside my bedroom door. It was late at night. The house was dark on the screen, illuminated only by the infrared of the camera. Dante and Jessica were standing outside my door. They were arguing in harsh whispers. I hate him, Jessica was saying. I hate the way he smells. I hate the way he looks at me. He eats like a pig. He is disgusting, Dante agreed. He is a useless old relic. I wish he would just have a heart attack and save us the trouble. Why does he have to be so healthy? Why can't he just die like Mom? On the screen, Dante kicked my door lightly, just hard enough to make a noise, but not hard enough to wake me. He spat on the floor right in front of the threshold. Die, old man, he hissed at the closed door. Just die. I paused the video again. The silence in the living room was suffocating. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. I could hear Dante's ragged breathing. Sincerity, I asked. Is that what you call that? Is wishing for your father's death compassionate care? Dante fell to his knees. It wasn't a dramatic gesture this time. His legs just gave out. He looked at the screen, then at me, then at the floor. I was drunk, he mumbled. I didn't mean it. It was the stress. Stress doesn't make you a monster, son, I said. It just reveals the monster that is already there. But I wasn't done. I had one more clip to show. The smoking gun. The one that wouldn't just destroy his claim to the money, but destroy the last thing he thought he had. His marriage. I looked at Jessica. She was staring at the floor, refusing to look at the screen. She knew what was coming. She knew what she had done. And then there is this, I said. I selected the final clip. It was from 3 days ago. The day Dante had gone out to pawn his watches, the day he was running around the city sweating and begging to save my life. The camera angle was the living room. Jessica was alone. She was on the phone. She was pacing back and forth, twirling a lock of hair around her finger, smiling in a way she never smiled at Dante. Hey, baby, she was saying into the phone. No, he is gone. The idiot is out selling everything he owns. She laughed. It was a light, flirtatious sound. Yeah, he thinks he is saving the inheritance, she continued. He is so stupid. Listen, as soon as the check clears, I am gone. I am leaving him. I already packed a bag. She paused, listening to the person on the other end. No, I am not splitting it with him, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I talked to a lawyer. If I divorce him right after the funds transfer, I can take half. And with the other accounts I siphoned, we will be set. We can go to Cabo like we planned. Forget Dante. He is a sinking ship. I am jumping off before he drowns. I love you too, she whispered. See you soon. I stopped the video. The screen went black. The room felt small. The walls seemed to be closing in. Dante was staring at the black screen. He wasn't blinking. He wasn't breathing. He turned his head slowly, robotically toward Jessica. You were leaving, he whispered. Jessica didn't answer. She didn't deny it. She couldn't. Her voice was right there, hanging in the air. You were stealing from me, Dante said, his voice rising. I was out there. I was selling my grandfather's watch. I was begging pawnbrokers, and you were on the phone with him. Who is he? Dante screamed, scrambling to his feet. Who is he, Jessica? Jessica stood up, backing away. It doesn't matter, Dante. Look at us. Look at this house. Look at you. You are a loser. You have always been a loser. Your father was right. You couldn't even keep your inheritance for 30 days. Why would I stay? Dante let out a sound that wasn't human. It was a roar of pure pain and fury. He lunged at her. He didn't hit her. He grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her. You traitor, he screamed. You snake. I did everything for you. I fought my father for you. I ruined my life for you. Jessica clawed at his face. Let go of me. You ruined your own life because you are weak. You are a weak man, Dante. That is why your father hates you. That is why I cheated on you, because you are weak. They fell onto the floor, wrestling amidst the debris of their broken life. It was a pathetic sight. Two people who had conspired to destroy me now tearing each other apart. Mr. Sterling stood up. He didn't look shocked. He looked bored. He had seen this before. Greed always ends in blood. Otis Sterling said, his voice cutting through the noise of the fight. I have seen enough. The evidence is conclusive. The terms of the trust have been violated on multiple counts. Abuse, malice, fraud, and a complete lack of moral character. He snapped his briefcase shut. I am officially dissolving the probationary trust, he announced. Dante Freeman is disinherited, effective immediately. Dante stopped fighting. He pushed Jessica away and looked up at Sterling, his face scratched and bleeding. No, he gasped. No, you can't. I just did, Sterling said. Dante looked at me. He crawled toward me on his hands and knees, dragging himself across the rug. Dad, he pleaded. Dad, please, don't let him do this. She tricked me. It was her. She made me do it. She poisoned my mind. I am your son. I am your blood. I looked down at him. I saw the boy I used to carry. I saw the teenager I taught to drive. But I also saw the man who spit on my door. I saw the man who wished me dead. I am your father, Dante. I said, my voice heavy with a sadness that felt like a stone in my chest. And because I am your father, I cannot let you have this money. It would kill you. It has already killed the good part of you. If I give you $55 million now, you will drink it or gamble it or let another Jessica steal it. I leaned down close to his face. You are broke, son, I whispered. You are homeless. You are alone. And for the first time in your life, you are going to have to be a man. I stood up and turned my back on him. Mr. Sterling, I said, show them the door. But the door wasn't the only thing opening. Outside, I heard the wail of sirens. The police were here, and they weren't here for a noise complaint. The smoking gun on the TV screen was just the beginning. The real judgment was about to walk through the front door wearing a badge. The silence in the room following Mr. Sterling's declaration was heavier than any slab of steel I had ever moved in the mill. It was the silence of a guillotine blade hanging at the very top of its arc just before the drop. Dante and Jessica were still on the floor panting from their brawl, but they had stopped fighting. They were looking at Sterling like he was a god who had just announced the end of the world. Sterling adjusted his glasses. He did not look at them with pity. He looked at them with the cold detachment of a man who deals in facts and contracts. He opened the blue folder again. He pulled out a single sheet of paper that looked official, stamped with the seal of the state. To be perfectly clear, Sterling said, his voice filling the cavernous room, the $55 million trust was never yours, Dante. It was a conditional gift, a test, and you have failed that test in every conceivable way. Therefore, in accordance with the wishes of the late Betty Freeman and the stipulations of the character clause, the entirety of the estate is hereby transferred to the secondary beneficiary. Dante scrambled up from the floor. He looked wild. His hair was sticking up. His shirt was torn from the fight. His face was smeared with blood and tears. Who, he screamed. Who is the beneficiary? Who gets my money? Is it you, Dad? Did you steal it back? I stayed silent. I let Sterling answer. The money, Sterling said, reading from the document, does not go to Otis. Otis has his own pension, he has his own dignity. The money, all $55 million, is being transferred immediately to the Betty Freeman Foundation. Dante blinked. The what? The Betty Freeman Foundation. Sterling repeated. It is a charitable trust established by your mother 5 years ago. Its mission is to provide housing and legal support for the elderly who have been abandoned or abused by their families. I watched the realization hit Dante. It hit him like a physical blow. He staggered back until his legs hit the coffee table and he sat down hard. A charity, he whispered. You gave my inheritance to a charity. Jessica let out a shriek. It was a sound of pure madness. A charity, she yelled, clawing at her own hair. You gave $55 million to a bunch of old people. Are you insane? That is our money. We earned it. We suffered for it. You suffered nothing, Sterling snapped, losing his professional cool for the first time. You lived in luxury you didn't pay for. You drove cars you didn't buy. And when the bill came due, you tried to sell your own father to pay it. Sterling turned a page in the file. And that brings us to the house, he said. Dante looked up. His eyes were desperate, pleading. At least we have the house right. Mom wouldn't throw me out. This is my childhood home. I have rights, squatter's rights, something. Sterling shook his head slowly. The house is an asset of the estate, Dante. It was purchased by Otis and Betty Freeman. It is titled to the trust. Since the trust has now dissolved in favor of the foundation, the house is now the property of the Betty Freeman Foundation. He looked at his watch. In fact, the board of directors has already earmarked this property. It is going to be converted into a transition center for seniors who have lost their homes due to financial exploitation. I almost smiled. Betty would have loved that. The house where her son tried to destroy her husband was going to become a sanctuary for people just like me. It was poetic. It was perfect. So Dante Sterling continued closing the folder with a finality that sounded like a gunshot. You are trespassing. You are currently occupying the property of a charitable organization without authorization. He looked at Dante, then at Jessica. You have 1 hour, he said. 1 hour to remove your personal effects and vacate the premises. Anything left behind after 60 minutes will be considered a donation to the foundation. 1 hour, Jessica screamed. She looked around the room at the furniture, the art, the things she thought defined her. We can't move in an hour. We have clothes, we have shoes, we have furniture. The furniture belongs to the house, Sterling said. The art belongs to the house. You may take your clothes and your toiletries. That is all." Dante looked at me. He looked at the man he had thrown into the snow with nothing but a suitcase. "Dad," he whispered, "you can't let them do this. Where will we go?" Vinny took the car. "We have no money. We have nowhere to go." I looked at him. I remembered standing on that porch shivering, watching them celebrate. "You have legs, son," I said. "Use them. Start walking, just like I did." But before Dante could beg anymore, the front door opened again. This time it wasn't Vinny. It wasn't a neighbor. It was the police. 4 officers walked in. They were not smiling. They were not here for a welfare check. They were here for business. 2 of them walked straight toward Dante, but the other 2, the ones with the detectives' badges, walked toward Jessica. "Jessica Freeman," one of the detectives said, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. Jessica froze. "Me? Why me? I am the victim here. He hit me." She pointed at Dante, trying one last desperate manipulation. "We aren't here for domestic disturbance, ma'am," the detective said. "We are here for fraud, forgery, identity theft, and grand larceny." Jessica's face went white. "What? What are you talking about?" "We have been tracking the accounts," the detective said. "We have the logs from the bank. We have the video of you cashing forged checks at the check cashing place on 5th Street. We have the testimony of Mr. Sterling regarding your attempt to bribe an officer of the court. And we have the digital trail of you opening credit cards in Otis Freeman's name." Jessica looked at Sterling. "You told them." "I am an officer of the court," Mrs. Freeman, Sterling said coldly. "When you tried to bribe me, you committed a felony. I recorded it. I sent it to the district attorney." The detective grabbed Jessica's wrist. She tried to pull away, but he spun her around and slammed her against the wall. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the world. "You have the right to remain silent," the detective recited. Jessica started screaming. Not words, just sounds. Animal sounds of panic. No, Dante, help me, do something, you coward, help me." Dante just stood there. He was paralyzed. He watched his wife, the woman who had convinced him to destroy his family, get dragged out of his living room in cuffs. He watched her kicking and screaming her expensive dress, riding up her makeup smearing with tears and snot. She looked at me as they dragged her past my chair. "Otis," she begged. "Otis, please. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them I had permission. I will do anything. I will sign anything. Please don't let me go to jail. I can't go to jail." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had poured laxatives in my soup, the woman who had called me a useless old relic. "I don't know this woman, officer," I said calmly. "She is just a trespasser." They dragged her out the door. Her screams faded as they put her in the back of the squad car. The room was quiet again. Dante stood in the middle of the wreckage. He was alone, truly alone. His wife was gone. His money was gone. His house was gone. He looked at the officers who remained. "Are you taking me too?" he asked, his voice hollow. "Not today, Mr. Freeman," the officer said. "Unless you want to confess to something." Dante shook his head. He looked at me. "I have nothing to confess," he whispered. "I have nothing left." Sterling checked his watch. 55 minutes, Dante," he said. "You better start packing." Dante moved like a zombie. He walked to the stairs. He went up to the bedroom he used to share with his wife. I heard him throwing things into a bag. It wasn't the confident packing of a traveler. It was the desperate grabbing of a refugee. I stood up. I walked over to the window. I watched the police car drive away with Jessica in the back. She was going to a place where her manipulation wouldn't work. She was going to a place where she would have to answer for every dollar she stole. And Dante. Dante was about to step out into a world that wanted to eat him alive. Vinny was still out there. Vinny was waiting. Vinny didn't care about arrests or charities. Vinny cared about his $400,000. Dante came back down 10 minutes later. He had a gym bag over his shoulder. He was wearing a winter coat over his torn suit. He looked at the room one last time. He looked at the fireplace where he had planned to hang his portrait. He looked at the spot where he had toasted to his legacy. It was all dust now. He looked at me. "Dad," he said. I turned to face him. "I don't have anywhere to go," he said. "I know," I said. "I don't have any money," he said. "I know," I said. "They're going to kill me, Dad. Vinny. He is going to kill me." I looked at him. I saw the fear. It was real this time. It wasn't an act. I didn't offer him a room. I didn't offer him a loan. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the envelope Mr. Sterling had given me weeks ago, the one with the emergency cash. I hadn't spent it. I had saved it for this moment. I walked over to him. Dante flinched as I approached. He thought I was going to hit him. I didn't. I held out the envelope. "There is $100 in there," I said, "and a bus ticket, one way." Dante took the envelope. He looked inside. He looked at the ticket. "Where does it go?" he asked. "It goes to Detroit," I said. "Detroit," he whispered. "Why Detroit?" "Because that is where I started," I said. "That is where I got off the bus 50 years ago with nothing but the clothes on my back and a willingness to work. There are mills there, Dante. There are factories. They are always hiring men who are willing to sweat." "You want me to work in a factory?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I want you to become a man," I said. "And men work. Men pay their debts. Vinny won't look for you in a steel mill in Detroit. He looks for guys in suits in high rises. If you want to live, you disappear. You go there, you change your name, you put on a pair of work boots, and you learn what a dollar actually weighs." Dante looked at the ticket. He looked at the door. He realized it was his only chance. It was a lifeline. It wasn't the lifeline he wanted, but it was the one he needed. He gripped the envelope. He didn't say thank you. He couldn't. His pride was too broken. He just nodded. A small, jerky motion. He turned and walked to the door. He opened it. The cold air rushed in again, just like the night of the funeral. He stepped out onto the porch. He hesitated for a second, looking back at the warmth, looking back at me. Then he stepped down into the snow and started walking toward the street. He didn't look like a millionaire anymore. He looked like a man running for his life. I watched him go until he turned the corner and vanished into the gray city. Mr. Sterling walked up beside me. "You saved his life, Otis," he said quietly. "I gave him a chance." "Archibald," I corrected. "Whether he saves his life or not is up to him." Sterling closed his briefcase. "The charity will be set up by tomorrow," he said. "We will start moving the furniture out on Wednesday." "Good," I said. "Burn the furniture. I don't want it. Buy new stuff. Good stuff. For the people who need it." "What about you?" Otis Sterling asked. "Where will you go? You have $55 million in a charitable trust, but you are effectively homeless again." I smiled. I looked around the empty house. "I am not homeless," I said. "I just don't live here anymore." I walked over to the table and picked up my hat. "I bought a truck," I said. "An old Ford and a camper. I always wanted to see the Grand Canyon, Archibald. Betty and I always talked about it." Sterling smiled. "A road trip, a new life," I said. I walked out of the house. I didn't look back. I left the door unlocked. There was nothing in there worth stealing anymore. The real treasure was gone. I walked down the driveway to where my new old truck was parked. Beast was waiting in the passenger seat, his head sticking out the window, barking happily. I climbed in. The engine roared to life. It was a rough, loud sound, a beautiful sound. I put it in gear and drove away. Behind me, the police sirens faded. The house faded. The memory of my son's betrayal faded. I had $55 million doing good work in my wife's name. I had a dog, I had a truck, and for the first time in a long time, I had peace. Dante was on a bus to Detroit. Jessica was in a cell, and Otis Freeman was finally free. The police cars faded into the distance, their sirens wailing like banshees dragging a soul down to the underworld. Jessica was gone. Her screams were gone. The house was suddenly quiet, but it was a heavy, suffocating silence, the kind that fills a room after a bomb goes off but before the dust settles. Dante stood in the center of the living room, staring at the empty doorway where his wife had been dragged out in handcuffs. He looked like a man who had woken up from a dream only to find himself falling from a skyscraper. His tuxedo was torn at the shoulder from the fight. His face was swollen purple and yellow from Vinny's lesson earlier that morning. He was shaking violently, not from the cold that was seeping in through the broken doorframe, but from a terror that went down to his marrow. Mr. Sterling stood by the fireplace, snapping the locks on his briefcase shut. The sound was loud and final, like a judge banging a gavel. He looked at Dante, then at me, and gave a small nod. He knew his part was done. The law had spoken. Now it was time for the Father to speak. Dante turned his head slowly to look at me. His eyes were wide and rimmed with red. He looked at the luxury furniture he couldn't keep. He looked at the empty spot on the wall where he had planned to hang a portrait of himself. Then he looked at the window. He knew who was out there. Vinny. The shark didn't care about arrests. Vinny didn't care about charity foundations. Vinny cared about his $400,000, and the clock was ticking. Dante took a step toward me, then his legs gave out. He didn't fall gracefully. He collapsed. He hit the floor hard, his knees cracking against the hardwood. He crawled the last few feet until he was right in front of my chair. He reached out and grabbed the hem of my trousers, burying his face in the fabric. "Dad," he sobbed. His voice was muffled, wet with tears and snot. "Dad, you have to help me. They are going to kill me. Vinny is going to kill me." I looked down at the top of his head. I saw the thinning hair, the expensive haircut that couldn't hide the shape of his skull. I remembered washing that head when he was a baby, careful not to get soap in his eyes. I remembered the smell of him then, clean and innocent. Now he smelled of sweat and fear and expensive cologne that had turned sour. "Please, Dad," he begged, clutching my leg tighter. "I know I messed up. I know I was wrong, but this is my life. They said they would cut me up. They said they would put me in the river. You have $55 million. You can pay them. It is nothing to you. Just write a check. Save me. Please save me." I sat there unmoving. I didn't pull my leg away, but I didn't reach down to touch him either. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't anger anymore. The anger had burned itself out, leaving behind a pile of cold gray ash. It wasn't hate either. I could never hate my own son no matter what he did. It was pity. It was a deep, hollow pity for a man who had been given everything and had turned it into nothing. A man who had reached the age of 35 without ever learning how to be a man. I looked at Mr. Sterling. The lawyer was watching us, his face impassive but his eyes sad. He knew what had to be done. "Dante," I said, my voice soft but firm in the empty room. "Look at me." Dante lifted his head. His face was a mess. Tears streamed down his cheeks, mixing with the dried blood from his lip. He looked pathetic. He looked like a child who had broken a vase and was terrified of the belt. "I cannot pay your debt, son," I said. Dante's eyes widened in panic. "Why not?" he screamed. "You have the money. You gave it to a charity. You can take it back. You can write a check. Do you want me to die? Is that it? Do you want them to kill me if I pay them?" "Dante," I said, leaning forward, "I am not saving you. I am just buying you more time to be the same person you are right now. If I pay Vinny, you will learn that there are no consequences. You will think that no matter how big the hole is, Daddy will build a ladder. And next year it won't be Vinny. It will be someone worse, and the debt will be bigger." "No, Dad, I swear," Dante cried, grabbing my hands with his bloodied fingers. "I learned. I promise. I will change. Just pay him off and I will go away. I will get a job. I will do anything. Just don't let me die." I pulled my hands away from his grip. I reached into the inside pocket of my suit jacket. "I am going to save your life, Dante," I said, "but I am not going to save your lifestyle." I pulled out a plain white envelope. It wasn't thick. It didn't bulge with cash. It was flat and light. Dante looked at it, hope flaring in his eyes. He thought it was a check. He thought it was the answer to his prayers. I held it out to him. "Take it." He snatched it from my hand, tearing it open with trembling fingers. He reached inside. He pulled out two things. The first was a crisp $100 bill. The second was a Greyhound bus ticket, one way, to Detroit, Michigan. Dante stared at the items in his hands. He looked confused. He looked at the envelope again, shaking it upside down, expecting a check to fall out. Expecting a miracle. Nothing else fell out. "What is this?" he whispered, his voice trembling. "What is this, Dad?" "This is your start," I said. "Detroit." Dante stammered, looking at the ticket. "Why Detroit?" "Because that is where nobody knows your name," I said. "Vinny is looking for Dante Freeman, the millionaire. He is looking for a guy in a Lamborghini. He isn't looking for a nobody on a bus to the Rust Belt." I stood up. My knees cracked, but I stood tall. I walked over to the window and looked out at the dark street. 50 years ago, I said my back to him. I stood where you are standing. Not in a mansion, but in the dirt. My father kicked me out when I was 18. He gave me $20 and a kick in the pants. I took a bus to this city. I didn't know a soul. I slept in a shelter the first week. I washed dishes the second week. And then I found the mill. I turned back to face him. "I worked every day for 40 years, Dante. I ate beans. I saved pennies. I built a life out of sweat and iron. I built this house. I built your future. And you tried to sell it for parts." Dante was staring at the $100 bill. He looked like he had never seen such a small amount of money before. "You are sending me away," he said, his voice hollow, "with nothing." "I am sending you away with more than I had," I said. $100 is a fortune if you know how to work. It buys you a week in a rooming house. It buys you a pair of work boots. It buys you a chance. But Vinny... Dante started. "Vinny won't follow a ghost," I said. "You leave tonight. You get on that bus. You go to Detroit. You change your name. You cut your hair. You take off that suit and you throw it in the trash. You disappear, Dante. That is how you survive." "But my life, my friends..." "Your friends are gone," I snapped. "Your life is a lie. Jessica is in jail. Your investors are suing you. You have nothing here but a shallow grave waiting for you. I am giving you a way out. It is not the easy way, it is the hard way, but it is the only way that keeps you breathing." Dante looked at the ticket again. I saw the realization sink in. He saw the truth of it. He knew I wasn't going to write the check. He knew I was serious. He stood up slowly. He looked around the room one last time. He looked at the luxury he had craved so desperately, the lifestyle he had sold his soul to maintain. It was all just furniture now. It was all just props on a stage that was being struck. He looked at me. For the first time in years, I didn't see the arrogance. I didn't see the entitlement. I saw fear. And under the fear, I saw a tiny flicker of respect. Or maybe it was just shock. "You really aren't going to help me, are you?" he whispered. I walked over to him. I put my hands on his shoulders. I felt him trembling. "I am helping you, son," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I am giving you the greatest gift a father can give a son who has lost his way. I am giving you rock bottom." I squeezed his shoulders. "Rock bottom is solid, Dante. You can build on it. You can't build on lies. You can't build on debt. But you can build on the ground." I let him go. "The bus leaves in 45 minutes, I said, checking the grandfather clock in the corner. "You better start walking. The station is 3 miles away." Dante nodded. He didn't argue. He didn't beg anymore. The fight had gone out of him. He put the $100 in his pocket. He held the ticket in his hand like it was a passport to a foreign country. "Goodbye, Dad," he said. His voice was barely a whisper. "Goodbye, Dante," I said. He turned and walked to the door. He didn't take a bag. He didn't take a coat. He just walked out in his torn suit and his dress shoes. He opened the door. The cold wind rushed in, swirling the snow on the porch. He stepped out. He didn't look back. He walked down the steps and started down the long driveway. I watched him go. I watched his figure get smaller and smaller under the streetlights. I watched him turn the corner and disappear into the night. My son was gone. The boy I raised was gone. The thief he had become was gone. Hopefully somewhere on a bus to Detroit a man would be born. Mr. Sterling walked up beside me. He put a hand on my shoulder. "That was the hardest thing I have ever seen a man do," he said quietly. I nodded, blinking back tears. "It had to be done," I said. "He needs to know what it feels like to be cold. He needs to know what it feels like to be hungry. Only then will he understand what I gave him." I turned away from the window. The house felt huge and empty. "Lock it up, Archibald," I said. "I am done here." "What about you?" Sterling asked. "Where will you go?" I looked at the door. "I am going to find my truck," I said. "I have a dog waiting for me, and I have a lot of road ahead." I walked out of the house, leaving the keys on the table. I left the $55 million behind. I left the betrayal behind. I walked out into the snow just like I had 30 days ago, but this time I wasn't shivering. I was warm. I had saved my dignity. I had saved my legacy, and maybe, just maybe, I had saved my son. But that was his story to write now. Mine was just beginning. The sale of the house happened fast. I did not want to haggle, and I did not want to wait. I sold it to the first developer who offered cash. He wanted to tear it down and build condos. Good. Let him. I wanted the walls where my son plotted my death to be turned into rubble. I wanted the floorboards where Jessica walked in her stolen shoes to be splintered. I took the check for the house and I added it to the $55 million already sitting in the Betty Freeman Foundation account. Mr. Sterling thought I was crazy. He told me I should keep the house. He told me I should live out my days in luxury. But Sterling is a lawyer. He understands the law, but he does not understand ghosts. That house was full of them now. The ghost of the boy Dante used to be. the ghost of the family we tried to build. I could not sleep there another night without hearing the echoes of their greed bouncing off the ceiling. So I signed the papers. I handed over the keys for the second time in a month. But this time I was not being kicked out. I was walking out. We used the money to buy an old hotel on the outskirts of the city. It was a brick building, sturdy and honest, just like Betty. We hired contractors to fix the roof and paint the rooms. We bought new beds, warm blankets, and soft pillows. We hired a kitchen staff who knew how to cook pot roast and mashed potatoes. We named it the Betty Freeman Home for the Dignified. It wasn't a shelter, it was a home. It was for the old men who had been discarded by their children. It was for the widows who had lost their savings to scammers. It was for people like me who had worked hard all their lives only to find themselves standing in the snow with nothing. I spent a few weeks overseeing the construction, making sure the wheelchair ramps were solid, making sure the heating system could handle a Pittsburgh winter. I ate lunch with the workers. I swept the floors. I felt useful again, but I knew I couldn't stay. I wasn't ready to settle down. The road was calling me. On the morning I left, I packed the camper attached to my old Ford pickup. I packed my fishing rods. I packed a cooler full of sandwiches. I packed Betty's picture on the dashboard where she could see the road ahead. Beast jumped into the passenger seat. He looked at me with his tongue lolling out, ready for adventure. He didn't care about money. He didn't care about houses. He just wanted to be with me. That is the only kind of loyalty that matters. I started the engine. It coughed once, then roared to life, a deep throaty rumble that vibrated in my chest. I drove out of the city. I drove past the steel mill where I had left my youth. I drove past the cemetery where Betty was resting. I told her I was going to see the world for both of us. As I merged onto the highway heading west toward the setting sun, I saw flashing lights in my rearview mirror. A police cruiser was pulled over on the shoulder a few hundred yards back. I slowed down out of habit, checking my speedometer, but they weren't coming for me. I looked closer as I passed. There was a man standing by the side of the highway, handcuffed, leaning against the hood of the cruiser. He was wearing a torn suit and dress shoes that were ruined by the mud. He looked defeated. He looked small. It was Dante. He hadn't made it to the bus station. Or maybe he had tried to use a credit card to buy a meal and the system had flagged him. Or maybe the warrant for the credit fraud the detective mentioned had finally caught up to him. I watched him as I drove by. He looked up. Our eyes met for a split second through the glass. He didn't wave. He didn't scream. He just looked at me with a profound sadness. He knew. He knew I had given him a chance, and he knew that his past had been faster than his feet. I didn't stop. I couldn't. If I stopped, I would try to save him again. And I knew now that I couldn't save him. The law had him. The consequences had him. He was going to go to a place where he couldn't hurt anyone anymore. Maybe in prison, stripped of his pretenses, stripped of his greed, he would finally find the man he was supposed to be. I turned my eyes back to the road. The sun was going down, painting the sky in streaks of purple and gold. It was beautiful. I rolled down the window. The air was cold, but it smelled clean. It smelled like pine trees and gasoline and freedom. I reached over and patted Beast on the head. "We made it, boy," I said. "We made it." I was 76 years old. I was a widower. I was a father who had lost his son. But I was also Otis Freeman. I was a millionaire who lived in a truck. I was a man who had walked through the fire and come out the other side without burning his soul. I turned on the radio. Some old blues song was playing. I tapped my fingers on the steering wheel. The road stretched out ahead of me, endless and promising. I had the Grand Canyon to see. I had oceans to cross. I had a life to live. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't worried about the destination. I was just happy to be driving. Many believe that legacy is defined by the bank accounts and properties we leave behind. They are wrong. True legacy is the character we build and the dignity we maintain when the world tries to strip us bare. I learned that you cannot buy love with inheritance, nor can you teach gratitude to those who feast on greed. Sometimes the greatest gift a father can give a prodigal son is not a bailout but the cold, hard ground of rock bottom. Only there, with nothing left to lose, can a man finally learn how to stand. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice and redemption. And tell me in the comments, what is the one thing you would never forgive family for doing? I read every single one. Until next time, keep your head up and your eyes open. You never know who is watching.